We're recording this so Daphne can use it again, and so that other people who didn't make it today because of DAs can make it. So if you want to keep your camera off, you're welcome to. As I was saying, an organizer for the Portland EWOCs. I am also a proud member of PDX Alliance for Self-Care. And I am also a whitebirder out of Eugene, which is where Daphne's presenting from today. From me and all of the EWOCs, thanks for being here. And that's my introduction today. Oh, also I use she, they pronouns. Let's go with Mary. Mary, what you got going on? How are you? Hey.
I'm good. Yeah, my name is Mary. I go by she or they pronouns, and I am also an organizer with EWOCs, and I'm in Portland. I don't know. I got my second COVID shot yesterday, so I'm kind of chilling out here. Is Reese or Catherine, are you able to introduce yourself?
I'm here, but my camera doesn't work on this computer, so I'm gonna log out and log back in a sec.
Oh,
I'm Reese, I go by they, them, and I like to participate in everything the EWOCs do, and I have tremendous trouble with food and eating and need medicine, so this is exactly the program for me. Thank you so much, Daphne and Mary and Kate.
Thanks for sharing that.
Catherine's unable to use their mic. They are on phone, but they say hi.
Hey, was there anybody else from your end? Are you ready for our people?
Everyone else that's here is still connecting, so I imagine they'll drop in. Let's do your folks.
Okay. You would like come over and stand over here to the camera, so don't have to move this.
You'd be good even if you were just in this chair here.
Yeah, just
Okay.
sit in this chair.
You can just switch on. Who gets the chair?
You're my intern.
Hi, I'm Shelby, and I am an intern for Daphne, and just starting this year. So just excited to learn. It's one of my one of my passions. So glad to get all this information.
And I'm Britt. I am the other intern that Daphne has here at Eagle Tree Farm. I have a little bit of experience with the crisis stuff here as well, so I'm happy for what you guys are doing and excited to learn.
Is there anybody else in your group that wants to do an introduction?
You know, sometimes Zoom can take a while to connect, so I think you're good to proceed, and they'll pop in, and it's recorded for everything that they missed.
All right. Well, I guess the first thing I want to say is my name is Daphne Singing Tree, and I am not a nutritionist or a naturopathic doctor or a doctor. My training was in midwifery. So I was a midwife for a little over 30 years. I worked with a lot of pregnant women in food and nutrition. That's a big part of having a healthy pregnancy. And I also, when I retired from midwifery, I really started focusing a little bit more on gardening, permaculture, and developed my little herbal business, slowly retiring the business and focusing more on teaching. I'm really happy to do this little workshop because my daughter has been really bugging me to do online workshops, and I have been a little bit hesitant. So I'm trying to expand my online stuff. So I take this opportunity.
Daphne, you got muted. Can you hear us?
No.
The other thing I kind of wanted to address, and I do that a little bit in the presentation, but sort of the elephant in the room, which is I'm the elephant, I'm in the room. Why? And I think that if you really want to learn, if you really want to ask somebody about diet, ask a fat person, because somebody who is overweight has probably spent a whole lot of time and a whole lot of energy and a lot of reading on nutrition, on health, on diet, following different diets, losing weight, falling off the wagon, gaining twice as much fat for years. And certainly that has been my issue. I even had a weight loss surgery. And then my heart, I lost so much weight so fast, my heart couldn't deal with it. And I passed out when I was driving and I had a car accident, broke both my legs, was in a wheelchair for over a year, and still I have lifetime mobility issues from that. So I have a real vested and lifelong interest in food as medicine. And so that's kind of what my thing is. My family heritage is Standing Rock. However, I was not raised on a reservation. It's my father's side of the family that was that's the Standing Rock tribe. So I don't like to, while it's my heritage and a lot of my spiritual practices, I don't try to represent myself as an expert on indigenous ways of knowing. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there. So what the plan is for today is we're going to go through this kind of PowerPoint presentation, which is it'll go by relatively quickly over some kind of highlights of stuff. We may take a break in the middle of the PowerPoint or not. We're going to go for about take a short break, come back, finish up with that, and if anybody has any questions on the presentation. And then I thought I'd take my phone around and we will do an actual tour of what we're doing here, which is she mentioned a farm. We're not really a farm. We're I have a big house in the suburbs, and well, I have a house in the suburbs with a big backyard. And so what we do here is all based on what I can do in my backyard, but we'll take a look at the compost tea and the worms and some of the herbs, and we'll take just a little bit of a tour in the gardens, but it's not going to go until 5. I'd like to be able to get out of here at 4, possibly a little bit earlier. It's going to depend on questions. I know humans eat. So everybody's got their own thing about food. And I want to hear people's on what works for you, what hasn't worked for you, what your opinions are on reading and all of that about food. So that's what the last kind of hour of this session is going to be, is for us to really share and talk about our feelings around it, our experiences, our knowledge, or I shouldn't say our, I want to hear what other people's responses. But while I'm giving this presentation, just so I don't get too off track and I can kind of stay fairly focused on the materials that I want to cover, I want to stay kind of on that. Hopefully that's going to work for everybody. Eagle Tree Herbs, yes. And if people want to support what I'm doing, you can go to eagletreeherbs.com. The website is currently open and selling things. I don't know how much longer it's going to be, but my nonprofit is Zaniya. And I'll go over that. I'll go over that in a minute, which is ZANIYAN.org. That's but I'd start with that because Zaniya is a Lakota word and it means a state of health or wholeness. And that's really what medicine is really about getting people back to a state of wholeness. And food as medicine is really about, I think of medicine as there's a capital M medicine. So medicine to me is more than just a tincture or a pill or something that you take when you're sick. Medicine is about replacing that state of health and wholeness. And that's going to take place in lots of different ways. That's spiritual, mental, physical, emotional. That's all what it takes for being, a whole and healthy person. And food can be that thing that not only feeds the body, but also feeds the spirit, the mind, as well as the body. So that's food as medicine. And first, I'd like to acknowledge this gathering is held in the unceded and ancestral lands of the Kalapuya people. And what we're going to cover today is how food promotes wellness and healing, phytochemicals or phytonutrients, relationships between unhealthy weight gain and trauma, growing food as medicine, inequities in the food systems, benefits of growing food, diets and eating plans, foods that boost the immune system, reduce inflammation, and address specific health issues, and what's food sovereignty and how it applies to both tribal and urban communities. This is a very big topic, and there's a whole lot of stuff and information I would have liked to have shared, but there was a little bit of a mix-up in scheduling, so I thought I was doing this a little bit later, so I kind of rushed through this. I would have liked to have gotten a little bit more on here, but it is what it is. Okay, so food nourishes and protects your body. Obviously, everybody needs to eat. Whole nutritious foods boost vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, fiber, protein, and fat, all of which promote health and is key to optimal body function. Nutrients in food are essential for energy, growth, and health. The lack of nutrients is the cause of inflammation and disease. Foods can prevent specific health problems such as heart disease, diabetes, and cancers, and that's one of the things that we're going to kind of talk more about. And then plants contain phytonutrients, and that can help heal specific health conditions. So we're going to go into that a little bit, but that's a whole area in which there's lots and lots of new research coming out. There's lots and lots of study about. I'm super excited about it, and it's actually a lot of the basis of herbal medicine. So that's kind of definitely more in my wheelhouse. So a typical American diet, and this is, I say American, but it could be Western diets, but America just seems to have the biggest the biggest problem. The only place for the poor people are fat.
Right, yes.
You're like, how many rich people do you know that are fat?
Right.
I know some people think that using the word fat is pejorative, but as a big person, I have to own it, like people own queer, like I'm a fat person. You can look at me and see that right off the bat. So if I can't be insulted if people call me fat. That's the truth. Now, that doesn't mean you should call somebody that.
Right.
They may or may not feel that way. But anyway,
Difference in empowered fat and otherwise.
Exactly.
You need to
Exactly.
work through your trauma on that.
Yeah, exactly. So, typical American diets contain highly processed foods and additives that contain unhealthy chemicals. We all know that, for everything from pesticides to chemicals and plastics, and who knows all what they put in it's all very nutritionally depleted. That includes stuff with some GMOs. Some GMOs specifically are genetically modified. Some genetically modified foods are genetically modified to allow certain, like the genetically modified rice that has more vitamin A, which has helped a bunch of kids avoid vitamin A blindness. So there's, just because it's genetically modified doesn't necessarily mean that it's always in every situation bad. But a lot of genetically modified foods are genetically modified to tolerate more pesticides. So what you get is like a genetically modified wheat, for example, will allow wheat so they can spray the Roundup. So you might get more Roundup. So it's not necessarily the genetically modified part that's the problem. It's the chemicals that the foods have allowed to come into place. And a very high percentage of, the typical American diet is the calories are empty calories, and a lot of them come from sugars and fats. And then, mostly this, typical diet, and this is actually changing. There's a lot of people that are much more conscious about food than there used to be, but we're really loaded with fast food, if not fast food, convenient food, frozen, the freezer, the microwave, foods that are designed, and then primarily foods that are designed for corporate profits. And that's whether it's, no matter how whether it's done in an agribusiness or a factory farm or a food manufacturing plant, even if that manufacturing plant is, Annie's Organics, mac and cheese box, it's, certainly a little bit better than your Kraft macaroni and cheese, but they both come from a plant, a factory, and they both have profitability as their bottom line. And so that's just something that people want to think about in terms of food. So that comes up with the question, is eating healthy only for the privileged? So, if you have a restricted diet or a diet discipline that you only eat organic food, or you're vegan or gluten-free or any other, one of these kind of categories, that is an expensive proposition. Or it's very, very limiting, or you grow primarily your own foods. So for the most part, it's expensive to, and not everybody can afford that. That's the next thing. So, and preparing healthy meals is time consuming. And that's especially true for working people. Also, lower income people often live in food deserts, where people have excessive or less access of places to buy healthy food. On the Standing Rock Reservation and the Pine Ridge Reservations, where I've spent a lot of my time, you have to drive 2 hours to get to the nearest grocery store to get fresh vegetables. 2 hours, and that's very typical. And that oftentimes the closest places, closest grocery stores where people eat are Dollar Trees. And sometimes they'll have, a bag of oranges or a bag of, they'll have this, minimal amount of some food, and convenience stores and gas stations. But if you want to go to, a shopping center, and then if you want to go to like a dedicated natural food store, you may have a very long drive. You may need to drive to the nearest big city, which may be 3 or 4 hours. And there's lots of places in the country like that. And here in Oregon, we are very privileged, And, even the gas stations around here sell kombucha. So, it's, we have a very different, a different model here.
True, I do. I do feel.
So, dietary habits are often generational. So, we eat what, a lot of times what we eat is what we grew up eating. So if you grew up poor, if you grew up in poverty, then, that's your habits of eating those kinds of foods, and those kinds of foods, um, uh, uh, those kinds of habits are very difficult to break. Even if you grow up and you have a lot more money than your parents did, you have more access to things that they did, you still have this, this foundation, or it's hard to think about these alternatives of choices of things that you could make or do, because your foundational knowledge of food and eating is something very different.
Just a pattern.
Yes, it's patterns. So habit patterns are a part of what are how everybody eats. But when you have grown up in poverty, or even generational poverty, where it's been what what somebody's grandmother cooked, and what their, and they learned from their mother, and it's gone back in quite a few generations, then it's a very, very different thing. And as much as I'm, a big fan of gardening, we'll talk about gardening and growing your own food, and I think it's the answer to everything. The getting together a garden and having the resources to do so is a barrier for people, particularly people who live in cities. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to work around it, and then there's certainly social programs that help people, but it is something that not a lot of people would, it's a little bit of a stretch too far. Like, one of the things that there's not, when I go back to the reservations, there's not a lot of experience in gardening, because a lot of what they do is big ranch farming, and they have a very short growing season. So one of the things that I do is I bring smart pots, then we buy dirt, and we do seeds, and we start with having somebody have a little smart pot of herbs. And just so, and so if they live, or if they live in an apartment, we do that here, is we give people, like, that's why I had you guys do these tomatoes in these pots. So I can give somebody a pot with a tomato in it. So you can start, people can start really small. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. I do that. That's why I try to stay on here, because
It's still good information.
What's food sovereignty? So food sovereignty is the right and the ability of tribal nations and peoples to cultivate, access, and secure nutritious, culturally essential food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods. And there is a big movement now for food sovereignty, and a lot of the tribes are really doing some really great stuff around that. And they're not only encouraging, they're going to court and getting their tribal fishing, hunting, and food gathering rights, as well as their ability to go in and gather foods. And there was a big landmark case about one of the national forests, and how the indigenous tribe in that area wanted to gather their native plants, and so they had to go to court in order to get that passed. So that is a growing movement, and it's even gotten to the point where people are starting to start businesses. And there's some that have been around for a long time, like the Minnesota rice people. So how does that apply to people who are not, who do not belong to a tribe? Well, food sovereignty is another way to look at it is about food resistance. And how can we be more self-sufficient and more self-sustaining in our food productions? And it's very difficult. I would say not impossible, but close up there. For any person, even if you have an acre or two, to become completely self-sufficient in food and produce enough protein. It's easy enough to produce enough vegetables, but to produce enough protein to sustain a family. But what is not so difficult is to do that on a community basis, and to make connections and with other local farms that are growing grains and beans, or and then have people focus on one particular thing, or maybe not even food production, maybe somebody who makes soaps, and then they can trade their soaps for something else. So food sovereignty is more about what can we do to sustain ourselves outside of the corporate structures, because that's what rules us right now. Is that's what feeds us right now, is corporate food systems based on fossil fuels. Shipping in foods, shipping in things. Oh, there's this story. I guess I've got all this time for a workshop. I usually do these workshops in an hour. So I'm like, all these times I can tell these little stories. So I read this article, and this was in the 90s, and it was called How Foodies Saved the World. And what it talked about is that, and this was in the 90s, is that a lot of the environmental movement really got up in the 70s, the Sierra Club, all of this stuff started really in the 70s, and people became really active. And what the article really talked about is that in 20 years, there hadn't been a whole lot of progress. We got some things changed, there were some laws made, but not dramatic progress happened. And then what happened is that people, there was a back to the land movement, and people went out to the woods and started communes and started growing their own food, but then those kind of fell apart, and everybody kind of came back, and that didn't really make a sustainable change that we thought was going to happen. But what did happen with this foodie movement is all of a sudden it started with people in fancy restaurants in cities who really wanted to eat like really super high quality food. So the farm to table movement happened, and then organic food started really catching on. And what happened in the process of more and more people and more organic foods taking place is, every time there is an organic farm that's successful, that's that much less petrochemicals that are coming into the system.
They feed the local restaurants who are wanting to provide those types of things too. So they're all supporting each other within the same community.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So that same farm to table movement, that same the farmers markets that start up, that means that's that less of a truck that's spewing that much pollution. And people start thinking about, wow, do I really want to have these strawberries in December, that get driven in from here, from far away. So that whole movement of changing the way people ate and thought about food made a substantial difference and footprint in the carbon footprint. And that's how foodies change the world.
Yeah, I like that. And
Yeah, it was a great article.
it's interesting because it's almost, if you think back farther, so like my grandmother, who was much older, my mom stopped it just to get an orange just to get an orange was such a big deal. So every Christmas at the Grange, we would, you know, as kids, as juniors, would get a bag with peanuts and hard candies and an orange. And I remember thinking, an orange? And I didn't know until last year that something that of how amazing it was for them to get an orange, and it kind of just stuck with the tradition.
Yes.
And so it's almost as if that has, you know, kind of spawned the whole transporting stuff. We can do this now.
Yeah, that's totally true. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is childhood trauma and food. So adverse childhood experience, there's an acronym called ACEs. They actually have a survey that people take and have a score that's used a lot for determining. There's been lots and lots of research done on this on many levels, how it affects people's lives, in how many people are unemployed, chronically unemployed or homeless that have high ACEs scores, or have mental health issues. There's lots of reasons for that. But certainly the one thing that's very clear is the greater number of ACEs, the greater risk for high risk health behaviors such as smoking, drug use, and obesity. The majority of studies, 87% report that high ACE scores are an extreme risk for developing obesity. And the other aspect of that is if you grow up hungry, grow up missing meals, or even wanting foods that everyone else eats and your family can't afford, that affects your relationships with food lifelong. Like, for example, my family was really poor and we ate commodities because this was before food stamps. That's how old I am, prior to food stamps. And we had, you'd have hot mush as opposed to cold cereal. And I have a lifelong, I will eat just about everything, but any kind of hot cereal, I still don't like oatmeal or mush or anything like that. So, I mean, and that's just typical. Everybody has got spam. I don't like either. But but when you grow up wanting something different than what you could get, that affects you as a child, and that affects you later on as an adult. And so that's another thing to keep in mind in terms of relationships with food. Well, actually, it might affect relationships of all kinds.
Yeah.
All I'm talking about today is food. So comfort foods, when we talk about comfort foods, they feel emotional gaps. So, when we're talking about not only ACEs, childhood trauma, but any kind of trauma that people have in their lives and that they feel an emotional hole with. Oftentimes we want to fill those holes, and what we want to fill them with, we want to comfort foods are often typically the things that we want to fill those emotional holes with. So and that can be an unhealthy pattern that can lead us away from wholeness.
That's why I like ooey gooey, because I don't know where my holes are and they have to seep down into it.
So sexual abuse survivors may feel like they're protective by excessive weight, particularly women, in the sense that if you are less sexually attractive, then you're hit on less. If you've had a bad experience, particularly in your early sexual development, of being hit on all the time, or having any kind of adverse sexual attention that makes you uncomfortable, your comfort zone may be to keep that away. And it may be a completely unconscious thing. Nobody really, I shouldn't say nobody, but there's most people don't want to be overweight or considered unattractive on a conscious level. But there's all kinds of, trauma affects us all in really different ways. And so one of the ways that trauma affects us very profoundly is our relationship with ourselves. And one of the things that we learn, the first thing that we learn, very first thing is we're hungry and we're fed. And that's really the primal thing that happens. And food is so much a part of that. And then when we separate from our mothers and we start eating, we start taking care of ourselves and feeding ourselves. If you feel like from traumatic experiences that affect the way that your own self-esteem, your own self-respect, your own self of being loved. They say food is love. So if you feel like the way that you get love is to eat, then you may go down this road of overeating or eating comfort foods or eating the foods that you grew up with, even if you know that they're not the healthiest foods. The other aspect of that is if you want to change and make this change of eating healthier, eating lower, less calories, exercising more, doing all these things to take care of yourself and make yourself healthier, you have to realize deep in your core that you're worth it. And people who experience a lot of trauma have a really hard time in their heart and in their soul knowing that they are really valued and worthwhile. So a lot of food issues really come into issues of self-care, and a lot of people who have self-care issues have issues with food, and that very typically, not that it only happens with women, but women tend to have some of these issues a lot because of the way that society works.
And the way that we're just naturally driven in that way. Like think of the age-old a way to a man's heart,
Yes.
his stomach, and then
Exactly. There's certainly cultural aspects of all of that too. So, and kind of going along with that is food addiction. Now, what's an addiction? Addiction is the persistence of a behavior despite adverse consequences. So somebody can drink a couple of beers every day and not be an alcoholic, but if they go and they get a DUI and they still keep drinking, or they lose their job because they're drinking, then they are probably an alcoholic. So an addiction is behavior despite adverse consequences. So despite the fact that I'm fat, I will eat too much pizza. So pizza is my drug of choice. And so and it's something that I struggle with. I know the same way, a smoker or a drug addict or an alcoholic, they know they've got an issue. They want, and they have this multitude of reasons, as unique as individuals are, is this, the same kinds of reasons, although trauma is a real big cause of a lot of issues. That's kind of but the other aspect of it is it can go the other way. Obsession about following a specific diet can be an unhealthy addition of others. I can't tell you how many people who have come to me with a health issue have said, oh, I have this problem because I accidentally ate some gluten, or and now I've got this stomach problem, or people who feel like if they don't eat 100% organic, or they don't eat a totally clean diet, or, if they, then they're going to have a particular health problem. And we all know that there's this powerful connection between the mind and the body. So if you have this obsession around food, it can be an addiction if you persist despite adverse consequences. So if you're having health issues and you're obsessed about your food and you don't make changes to address that, that's when it gets into the addiction model. But the other aspect of it is that certain foods, particularly fats, and actually there's been a lot of research about fast foods, and who knows what corporations actually put in that stuff, is that affects the pleasure centers of the brain the same way that drugs do. And they've shown that in CAT scans and models. And, there's certainly something that, you see a commercial for Carl's Jr. and you just have to go have a hamburger. And then you get that and it affects that same pleasure, so dopamine receptors, those same things in your brain that a drug would. So it's the pleasure centers of the brain. And of course, that's, food is the most primitive form of comfort. So it's going to really affect that.
It's sustainability. So it's like kind of like the primal thing. So it's like, when you were saying as a baby, you have to have food, you have to be fed to sustain and keep living. And then it with the emotional factor of it, like we don't realize maybe how we're feeling is why we are trying to feed that.
Right. So what Shelby was saying, I'm not sure how well people can hear the questions over here, is that the connection between when we're children and how we're fed as babies and children, and how that is tied into the pleasure centers of our brain, and that connection. Was that the point that you were making?
Yeah, kind of. I'll have to think more about it. How
Okay. So the other aspect of this is that overeating affects the satiation impulse in the brain. There's actually a hormone called leptin that's involved in that. So that also affects the lack of that satiation impulse. So it's kind of a question of, it's like when you eat and you're full, your brain says, okay, I'm full, I can stop eating. And that's like a hormonal process that happens as well as a physical process. So there was some research, is that missing in some people? That's why they overeat? Or does overeating cause those hormones to get out of whack, and therefore, it's kind of like a chicken or the egg kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's almost as if you can reprogram that in your brain by maybe like favoring the reaction you get from that boost of hormones or chemicals over that uncomfortable feeling you're having physically, because you're feeling more so uncomfortable mentally and emotionally. So you kind of do an override manually and trick yourself.
That's a really good way of putting it. Like there is, kind of an override. So, you eat enough, but somehow, because you've always been told your whole life, clean your plate,
Yeah.
then you have to finish eating, cleaning your plate. And, so, some of these things are habits, and, we're talking about generational things as well. Some of them are habits, and some of those are related to, our, internal subconscious dialogues around food. So all of those things are part of this. How are we doing in terms of time? Anybody?
Time is now 1:48.
We're doing a good job on
Okay.
watching it, aren't we?
She thought about it. I'll keep this out.
Before I go to the next section, does anybody have any quick comments or anything in the Zoom world out there?
I forget.
This is all great. Yeah, the trauma links are real.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if somebody doesn't want to interrupt me, you can, or you have a question, you can type it, and then I can periodically, we can, Kate can talk about it, or you can talk about it, but we can always, throw some, because I can't really see you all. I see the back of my phone. That's why I wanted to. I really appreciate Shelby and Britt coming on their non-intern days. So I'm talking to some actual people and getting some feedback rather than just the phone, because that wouldn't be so much fun.
I
Okay,
am running interference on the chat for you. Well,
what
not
was that?
interference. I was saying like I'm running interference like communications, but I'm not running interference. I am monitoring the chat. That's what I'm trying to say.
There's a chat on their, like on the window that they can type comments and questions in.
Okay.
Oh,
Well, so
yeah.
I see those comments and questions. So go ahead, if you need to interrupt me, Kate, go ahead. Particularly if you feel like if I said something that particularly on a particular slide that somebody needs some clarification on, but people there can see the slides. And Kate, are you able to figure out when to change the slides?
Yep, we're all good.
Okay. So the next thing is growing food combats inequities in the food system. And I know I'm kind of going on this theme here of grow your own food to get away from the corporate, corporate food systems. That's kind of,
That's part of
that's,
sovereignty. You're in charge.
that's kind of what the focus is. So gardening is a way to resist injustices and claim space in a world that doesn't always respond to your needs. Gardening promotes food sovereignty, which creates agency and independence, fighting against unresponsive corporate food suppliers and building a sense of self-determination. Growing food combats inequality in terms of healthy food access. Growing food creates community, interacting with other gardeners, and gardeners creates outdoor living, learning, and healing spaces. So I did this particular class last month, and a local Eugene BIPOC group who met during the protests started a little gardening project, Food for the People, from one of the community gardens. So they all got together. A lot of them were young people who, didn't have access to gardenings and, just wanted to get together with other BIPOC people, got together and did this little gardening thing. And somehow or another, they found me and asked me to come and talk to them. And so I did the food as medicine thing. And so this is only the second time I've taught this particular class. So that was, but what I thought was the coolest thing is here's this group of people who met during the protests. And Eugene didn't have anything like the protests in Portland. Eugene was like, very different. But they met, and their focus, while, some of them still focus on some of the political stuff and making changes on, and policing and political, the political things down the road. But what they chose to do is create a community garden and are working together. And the thing is now that they get together, they all work in the garden, they order pizza, they hang out. And then the next thing they did is they have come over here 2 different times, and they've helped me with garden projects. They learn from me. And so they have created a sense of community. And that sense of community, which is around gardening and creating food, is so much greater than what people could do on their own. And I just want to emphasize that importance of community. The other workshop that I teach, which was much more interesting before the pandemic, was we call it, was part of the Growing Resilience of herbal preparedness, and I talk a lot about preparing emergency preparedness and how to get through, various different things like forest fires and, like I said, before the pandemic, we talked about theoretical pandemics. Now it's not so interesting that we've lived through one, but the thing that I talk about a lot in terms of preparedness is that it's like a three-legged stool. You can have a lot of things that you've prepared, perhaps your stored food, your stored water, your gardens, all of those physical things. And then the next thing that you need is the knowledge, the skills, those abilities. But the other leg of that stool is the community. Like I was saying before, that nobody can really be completely self-sufficient in food. So the three-legged stool that'll fall without one of those other legs is community, knowledge, and whatever kind of the physical, the physical stuff, your preps. But I just skipped over to a whole other class, but I just wanted to throw that in. So gardening improves health. How I started really in doing gardening is after I really needed to lose weight, and I finally got, after many years of trying, got approval to have this weight loss surgery, and they wouldn't give me the weight loss surgery until I lost weight, which was really frustrating. So I was really motivated, because I really thought that if I lost weight, my world would totally improve. I would meet the partner of my dreams. I would make money. I would, live this glorious life if only I was thin. So it hasn't happened yet, but maybe it'll still happen. But in any case, I started gardening, and the thing that was the most important for me was it was something I could do at my own pace. And since my accident, that's even more so. So like I'll sit down out here and I'll get up and I'll do a little bit of weeding, and then I can sit back down, or I'll come and do some planting, or I'll be outside with my little cart and I can take my buckets off and sit on my little cart. So it really is something that you can, and it's really an accessible form of exercise and activity. But anyway, to get back to some of the real specifics, so one of it is being in the sun. Being in the sun is like photosynthesis. You know how plants need photosynthesis
They
to
lean
leave?
towards the light too.
Yeah, they lean towards light. People are like that. People need that on the process where you make your own food. The plants make their own food by being in the sunlight, and that's what people do. So half an hour in the sun can produce between 8,000 and 50,000 international units of vitamin D in your body, depending on how much your clothes cover and the color of your skin. So vitamin D is really critical in the immune system, and over the studies are showing that people are super deficient in vitamin E, and increasing vitamin D is like the single most thing that people can do for their immune system.
In the Northwest.
And especially in the Northwest, where we don't get enough sun. We don't. So
And along our, parallel, the multiple sclerosis. It's a big issue.
Oh, yeah, I would not be surprised. There's lots and lots of health conditions that are improved with enough vitamin D. And, I'm not huge on supplements, but vitamin D supplements are one of those things that I have found to be helpful, for me at least, and I think for many other people as well. But being outside is not only being outside is something that people need for their spiritual health, their mental health, as well. There's something about being outside and working in your garden and doing something that's gentle and productive, that's very healing. And then when you do gardening in your own space, or you go to a community garden and work with others, that's going to make this huge difference in people's moods. And there is do I have that on here? I think I missed it. Oh, yeah, it is some of that. Sorry. I gotta look at my little thing here, because otherwise I'll jump around too much. Okay, so gardening is the exercise has multiple health benefits, boosting strength, balance, promoting sleep, and health, maintaining a weight. As much as we talk about food in terms of what a difference food makes in terms of somebody's health, the next other thing that goes along with that is exercise. So exercise is probably one of the primary things that makes a huge difference in people's health. And as somebody who doesn't exercise very much or very well, I'm highly cognizant of that. And that if somebody was going to ask me what the two things that they could do to improve their health, diet and exercise, would certainly be the top of their list before any kind of supplements, before any kind of herbs, before anything else. Exercise is really, really key to people's health and to their mood. And any kind of exercise that you do that works for you, great.
Pulling weeds.
Pulling that, but if you pull weeds and you garden and you're growing food at the same time, that's a total plus. But going for a walk, going for a run, going to the gym, swimming, whatever. Like what was that? Was there a question over here?
No, it was just Pearl coming on about an hour in. They are one of the folks that I said would be a little late. They came on with sound, but you're good to continue.
Oh, okay. So the thing that so exercise is one of the benefits of gardening, but it's one of the primary things that really impacts people's health. And one of the things that I look at, and I'll go into that a little bit later when we talk about some specific diets, but I go back forth over this, and my students know this, is I really look at how people developed over 10,000 years, over 20,000 years of human development. And what did people do? They spent most of their time outside. They were physically active really hard, and they ate very simply. So I really look at and we'll go into that aspect of diet here, and cover that in a couple of other slides. But those are the aspects that I really look at. So how did people evolve to be the healthiest? And certainly sedentary lifestyles are kind of the opposite of the way that we were designed to function. So yeah.
I just want
Go
to
ahead.
just make a note. I'm personally, and I'm sure for many others, the word diet in itself, no matter how it's supposed to be used, is very triggering. And as soon as you hear that, you think dieting, the act of dieting. So I'm just wondering if you could clarify that.
That's a really good point.
We can
And,
touch
you know,
on
in the
diet.
next evolution of this presentation and slide, because like I said, this is only the second time I've done this. I think you're right. I try to avoid that in myself, in terms of I don't ever think about diets too much. That I've been on too many diets for the course of my life that I don't like to think of that word much myself either. So I totally get that. It still might be on here, and if you're triggered by that, I apologize, but I'll try to kind of keep that in mind. But I totally recognize that word diet is absolutely a trigger.
So when we say diet, we're more so just encompassing what you're putting in your body. And
What you
our diet.
food plans and other,
Yeah.
food plans, or there's and we'll talk about that a little bit more of diet disciplines and And then there's diet dog mints. Those are, you know, like kind of
Like
different.
diet versus diet tea.
Yes. But there may
So,
be a better
Daphne?
term. What was that?
I just want to do a quick check-in on the chat. There's been lots of talking about plant anarchy and finding good spots for guerrilla warfare or for guerrilla gardening here in Portland, and growing food as a resistance to the patriarchy. And then
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I'll definitely address that because I was actually thinking about that. I was actually thinking about that not too long ago when I had the local BIPOC group that came to my house. We didn't get a chance to do that because we were busy with some other things, but I have a bunch of sunchokes here that needed to be dug up, and I was going to have them dig up sunchokes and plant them all over, because and tiger nuts. There's quite a few things that you could plant here and there, as well as fruit trees and other things in urban areas. And I don't think of it so much as the political anarchy, that aspect of it, because that's not like my political viewpoint. I think of it more in terms of, because I'm a lifetime prepper, as preparation for the collapse of the system, or when the shift hits the fan. I like to think of the paradigm shift as, you know, when that happens, the more places that are growing food in lots of different areas. So, you know, absolutely, I think that having different ways of doing that, and when we're when we do our tour of the gardens, I can talk a little bit more about some of those foods that we're growing, and some wild foods. So that'll kind of give people. Hopefully that'll answer some questions in that.
Give some good ideas.
awesome.
Well, does that
And-
address
Yes. I think that going through the garden and seeing what might be helpful to plant in random places so people have food to eat is great. I was also answering questions and participating in that conversation. So I just want to do a check on which slide you're on.
Oh, I'm on gardening improves health.
Sweet, that's where I'm still at. Cool, continue
Yeah.
on.
All right. So gardening can help protect your memory. So some really good research. I did the other thing I don't have on this slide, which is why I'm not going to put the slide the PDF of the slide out until it's complete, is to when I say research, I always try to document stuff. So there is some really great research about how much better people's memories are when they're older, gardeners versus non-gardeners. And this has been some really good worldwide studies. So it affects the cognitive function for those, and some of the nursing homes in Europe, because we don't do this in our nursing homes in America very often. They specifically have horticulture therapy programs where they bring in gardeners to nursing homes, and like they have physical therapy, they have horticultural therapy. So they bring people out and they work in the gardens, and they're seeing like very different people involved in these programs have better cognitive functions than people who don't. So and then the other thing is that gardening is a mood booster. There's actual, and I'm sure that a lot of you have already read these studies. There's actual biochemical and phytochemicals in the dirt, microorganisms that affect the brain chemicals. So they're actually antidepressants in the dirt. And so instead of taking antidepressant drugs, if you go out in the garden, and so if you do have depression, and that is something that you're working with, take off your gloves. Put your actual hands in the dirt and get those microorganisms in your dirt. Yeah. Another kind of side thing is children, particularly babies, who are exposed to dirt, as in gardening dirt, pollens, those kinds of things, have less allergies, well, ear infections, asthma, all of those things are very prevalent in places where kids are kept immaculately clean or live in apartments or just don't have any connections with the earth. How are we doing in terms of time?
About 10 after 2.
Are we about ready for a break? How are you, Kate? Should we take a break at this point?
How are we feeling, participants? Would it be good to stand up and take a break?
I'm doing okay, but I've been up and moving around too. So
So are we moving on or are we taking a break?
You know what? Let's go ahead and take like 10 minutes and stand up and stretch. People can get water or just not talk to anybody for a minute, and then we'll all be better off for information absorbing.
Okay, great. So what time is it now? What time are we back?
2:10. Go back and
So we're back at 2:20?
Yep, sounds good.
All right, great. Let's take the phone off and plug it in during those 20 minutes. T&P.
TNP, yeah.
One makes room for the other, right?
Good idea. I didn't think about it. I didn't think about it.
Sometimes I've got some good ones. Yeah.
We're good
So
to go.
I found it very interesting that the whole topic, of food as medicine is super, super popular right now. And what's surprising is how many traditional medical practitioners are really looking at it. As a matter of fact, one of the doctors that worked with me at Standing Rock invited me to, I was invited a few years, I think the year after Standing Rock, so it was quite a few years ago now, to speak at a conference in Chicago, and about our experiences at setting up the medical stations at Standing Rock. And while I was doing that presentation, I attended a presentation that she did, and she started a food as medicine curriculum. I can't remember the name of the Chicago Medical School, but it's part of the Chicago Medical School doctor's curriculum. And it was just these doctors all in chef's hats. And one of the things that they did, because it's in Chicago, is they went to some inner city schools and they made food for kids in the inner cities. And it was really, what I've seen over and over is this younger generation of doctors have really taken on this concept of food as medicine. And this little quote is by Hippocrates: "Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food." And surprisingly enough, when I was doing some research on this topic, almost every single one of these had this particular quote in the beginning of their presentations. And we really have gotten to the point of really accepting of this concept. When I first started and I remember talking to somebody at one of the American Cancer Society events about herbs and cancer and food as prevention of cancer. And it was like, they thought I was nuts. It was just like the fact that you could prevent cancer from food, or prevent cancer or treat cancers from foods or herbs, that plants had any role in the prevention or treatment of disease was unheard of. Now people are really looking at it, and there's a lot of really good research on it. And there's so much stuff on it and so much good research there. I'm just like barely, barely scratching the surface. So, and also, like I said, I'm not a nutritionist. It's not my, there's going to be some gaps in this. So one of the things that I'm super excited about, and this is, even though they've been around for a long time, there's a lot of new research about what they call phytochemicals or phytonutrients. And what those are chemicals which are produced by plants. So there's some really interesting and unique things about phytonutrients. Phytonutrients are found in roots, barks, stems, leaves, flowers, fruits, and nuts. They're from plants, just plants. There's also other kinds of important nutrients and other kinds of foods. Like, there's certain kinds of really good fats and certain kinds of fishes, and eggs have got a lot of really good nutritional properties. And, there's lots of, meat that has some foods, but phytonutrients are specific to plants. And as a plant person, I'm working. So what phytonutrients do is they protect plants from microbes. So they're part of the protection, how a plant protects itself from being attacked by microbes. So that's one of the reasons why when we eat them, we get a certain amount of that same protection. So that's one of the reasons why all those phytonutrients are beneficial from health. They are not the same as vitamins. So, and they're also not essential for basic nutrition. So when all the scientists and the USDA and all of those people, they looked at the nutritional components of food, and they've broken it down to being really specific, that you need, so many calories out of the 2,000 calories a day, that you have so many milligrams of vitamin C, and so many milligrams of, all of these different nutrients. And if you're missing those, if you're missing vitamin A, you may, it could affect your eyes in a bad way. If you're missing vitamin C, you can get scurvy. So they've done a lot of research, and they have a lot of backgrounds on essential vitamins and minerals and what people need. What they haven't done a whole lot of research on, and it's just now coming into being looked at and developed, is phytonutrients, is the specific things that happen with plants. What's in plants in particular that's different. So, So the phytonutrients that are beneficial for health. So they've only really identified, they're still not completely understood, and there's hundreds of thousands unidentified. And one of the reasons why this is that science is propelled by grants, which are promoted primarily for somebody's corporate bottom line. Right. So, there's not a lot of research on, what plants may help prevent or treat diseases that you can't break it down and sell it. So if you can't, if somebody can just go out to their garden and grow or go wildcrafting and get food or medicine that helps them heal, then they can't buy it from a drug company or some other, or a corporate food entity. And so that's what's going to be missing, is a lot of research. I just want to take a minute here and say something why I go on and on about research. There's and some of this stuff, this is why this is kind of a little bit out of order, because when I do my first class, I talk a little bit about this, about evidence-based medicine, and how I'm a big fan of science. I'm a big fan of evidence-based medicine because it comes from my background in midwifery. But what I also learned in midwifery, and it comes in place of being a medicine maker as well, is there's science, there's research, and really, and that's important. And there's facts, which are multiple. One study doesn't make a fact. You know, it's an aggregation of repeatable studies that are peer reviewed and have enough of a health and a robustness that can be determined a fact. There's also anecdotal evidence or ancestral knowledge and knowledge that has been passed down through apprenticeship, knowledge that have been passed down through families. There's knowledge that is that science doesn't touch. There's science that's, you know, there's ways in which, you know, plants speak to us in a spiritual realm that it isn't going to go in that scientific realm. So even though I'm a big believer in science and evidence-based medicine, there's also another aspect in which I am a believer of as well, in which is the wise woman or the wisdom-based ancient knowledge that's also available. And, you know, people need to kind of, you know, balance those things out. So, and how that kind of, so that's what I'm talking about when science is talking about some really specific things about phytonutrients. I look at that. I value that. That doesn't necessarily mean that I think that it's that there isn't things outside of that are also valuable. So one of the things is that, so when you isolate phytonutrients, they appear to act differently than intact botanical products. And here's an example. Cocoa leaves are a plant. You chew them, you get a numb mouth, you get a little buzz, you want to run through the forest with a machete.
All right, definitely.
Up a mountain. And people who live in really high altitudes deal with the high altitudes.
Yeah.
You extract cocaine from it, and it totally changes it. Even though it's an integral part of, it's an active ingredient and why that has those effects, but that drug from that plant acts totally separately. So there's phytonutrients in those cocoa leaves that, you know, have multiple health benefits and multiple specific elements of medicine, you know, the big term medicine. Whereas as when you extract the actual drug, that may play a part. You know, cocaine has some very specific medical, you know, they put it in people's eyes to numb them for surgery. You know, some really specific uses. But it also has this, you know, real potential for abuse, of course. So when you isolate a phytonutrient and take it away from the plant, and that's one of the reasons why science has had a really hard time with this, because they work in labs, you know, and then so when you isolate those things and try to quantify it, concentrate it, make it really different, then you're having a completely different thing. Here's another example. When I grew up, we would smoke this weed which had seeds and stems, and you could smoke an awful lot of weed and do an awful lot of stuff because it wasn't very smoked. Not like the weed today, which has been, you know, has had, you know, 30, you know, 30, 40, 50 years of hybridization for a specific THC, you know, alkaloid that people are trying to, and then when people further extract it and then turn it into something to put in their little vape pens, it becomes more of a drug. So there is this difference between, so plants as whole beings have compounds that are unknown to science and may or may not ever be to science. So, and that's true with a medicinal herb or a food. They have things that are interlocking, and then the next aspect of that is that that they work synergistically. Somewhere in here I thought, yeah. So that means what synergistically means is it means one component to work on another. So, so we know that when we extract this one particular property out, we might get some particular effect very strongly, but we also may lose something that helps boost it in some way. And that's particularly true with things that are very complex and different, like things that prevent cancer. Cancers are complex, bodies are complex. One of the things that I really loved about when I first started learning permaculture, because I came from studying permaculture after a lifetime of studying midwifery. So when I was the midwife, one of the things that I very much was a part of midwifery was learning about what nature intended. How nature wanted to work with people. Endorphins are the natural pain receptors. So when a woman is relaxed, her endorphins goes up, she's able to handle pain better. So if she is in an environment where there's a lot of fear, that's going to have spike her adrenaline. It's not going to allow the endorphins, so she's going to have more pain. The same thing about lights. If she's in a hospital room with bright lights, that's going to affect her ability to produce endorphins. When people evolved, they didn't have electric lights. So the first thing I usually did when I was a midwife is walk in the room and turn off the lights. Because a low level of lighting is one of the things that helps boost those natural endorphins. So those complex systems, humans have this very complex homeostatic mechanisms. Like your eyebrows help keep dust from falling in your eyes, and your eyelashes will catch them. If you get a cut, you'll get your blood will fall. So there's all kinds of homeostatic mechanisms in the human body. And it's the same thing with permaculture, and it's the same thing with plants. There's all these homeostatic mechanisms. Like we're now learning about all these mycorrhizals and the way that the trees talk to each other and the plants talk to each other, and roots exude this substance that's helpful for its growth. So there's all these really complex features that happen in nature that are important and essential for our own health and well-being. And phytonutrients are a piece of that. And they're the piece of it that now they're being able to look at it, and science is being able to see some specifics. And I'm going to go into some of those specifics right now. But that's what I mean by synergistically. It's recognizing that plants are like whole complex beings and we need to respect those.
Kind of making me feel, it's just like my brain keeps going to the whole companion planting aspect of it.
Companion planting is another, that's certainly an aspect of it. So that's why whole unprocessed or minimally processed plants are the most effective. Those are the highest in those phytonutrients. For example, if we had sugarcane and we chewed on sugarcane, it wouldn't be that sweet. But since we process sugar to that extent, then it becomes almost like a drug. That's certainly one of my addictions, So, the whole of the plant, like that's why the best thing you can eat is a salad. Because to go out to your garden and pick a salad and eat a salad is the most amount of phytonutrients you're going to get, the most amount of whole unfiltered vegetables is your raw plants. Um, So, so phytonutrients are anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, anti-aging, and anti-cancer. And of course, some of those are different in different ways. And here's another way. I'm going to change this now after we said the rainbow diet. Take off the word diet. And it's not like the same as the rainbow tribe diet, which was eating out of dumpsters. Different diet. It's really about colorful foods. So, you know, the other thing I've heard is that your plate should look like somebody dumped a box of crayons, you know, so you should have multiple colors in what you eat. So when you know, when you're cooking a meal, think about, oh, the different colors. So if you want a balanced meal, really, we really should be talking about multiple colors as opposed to, do I have a grain? Do I have a protein? Do I have a vegetable? You know, because that's how I grew up, was thinking about that. That was the balance. You know, that was a balanced diet, is to, you know, to have those. Yeah, that, you know, that whole concept. So this concept is really about colors.
So I'm glad to hear that, because I thought maybe it was just one of my weird little quirks where I go, I think we should use the orange pepper in that because we don't have anything that color. I thought it was just one of my weird things, but maybe it's a natural thing.
Yeah, not at all.
I'm like, I eat beige colored food, like all starches and carbs. It's lived off like top ramen and crackers and pasta.
Yeah, I've heard
beige
people,
colored French
I've heard
fries.
people who go into no white diet, so they don't eat any, you know, white food, no white bread, no white rice, no pasta, you know, you know, and then they've been able to create, you know, a healthy meal plan of just avoiding
Just
white
color.
foods. So here's,
Interesting.
so back to this, so blues and purples. So I am not sure of the pronunciations for some of these phytonutrients. So I'm going to guess some of them I might say, and some of them I may be totally wrong. So, so in blue and purple foods, the phytonutrients are resveratrol. I'm not even going to try. I think I'm going to give up trying to pronunciate these, but it's on the slides, and hopefully I'll be able to get the slide in a good enough shape to publish here. Anthocyanins, phenolics, flavonoids from background. I don't even know what these are. I just know that they're good for you. But I do know that resveratrol is the same thing that is in grapes and red wine. So they have, I'm not sure if you all are familiar with what this is. This is a very old study that they sort of, it was called the French paradox. This was way back when people said, oh, the French people drink wine all the time, but they also drink all this heavy cheeses and cream this and cream that. They have a very high fat diet, but they have less heart disease than Americans. Why is that? Well, somehow they said, well, why is that? And then they discovered that it was the wine that French people drink. And then they discovered this resveratrol, and that there's the substance in wine, and for non-drinkers they could just drink grape juice, but it's got all kinds of really important, it's a very important, lots of things that are good.
Do you think it's in cherries as well?
We'll get to all the colors. So it supports heart, is a big thing of heart, brain and bone health. It helps control obesity, has antioxidants and anti-cancer properties. So it's just some of the things that they have in there. Acai berries. I can't berries. How do you say those? Acai berries. That's it. Blackberries, blueberries. Blueberries are one of the key things that cross the brain-blood barrier.
Yeah.
And so it's super good for brain, and super good brain food. Elderberries, of course, we all know about elderberries in the immune system. So much so, this is how much plant knowledge. you can go to Walmart in America and buy elderberries. You know, I would have never guessed that in a million years, you know. Purple grapes, plums, black beans, eggplant. Those are just some examples of purple foods that are high in those qualities.
Which for the darker the fruit, the higher the antioxidant.
Yes, and some of these are antioxidant properties, and some of these have these other phytonutrients. And remember, we don't, you know, I've got this list of phytonutrients. Those are the specific ones that science has identified, but there's many more that haven't been identified. And even if we have this one thing like this resveratrol, see what they did try to do is pull that out, put it in a drug to give to people, or pull that out and give it to a supplement for people. So a lot of these things are also in supplements. Like the supplement industry, I think it's just about as bad as the drug industry. I put that all in the whole corporate, you know, corporate thing. I mean, it's not that I don't believe in supplements. There's some that I take myself, but I think that what we really need to do is get back to plants, you know, and use plants and food as medicine as opposed to pills. So here's an interesting little fact that plants that produce blue and purple pigments to protect themselves from insects, and UV light damage. So that's where the purple. So red and pink. The phytonutrients are lycopyrene, ellagic acid, quercetin, hesperidine, anthocyanins. Don't I can give you guys this YouTube this slide. So so it supports prostate health, urinary tract, and your DNA. So these are the kinds of foods that they're in: raspberries, strawberries, cherries, cranberries, pomegranates, red cabbage, red bell peppers. And then you notice I said red as opposed to green on those. Radishes, tomatoes, watermelons, guavas, pink grapefruits, cayenne peppers. Obviously, there's lots more colored foods than I've listed here. So we're just talking about primarily red foods, but these ones that have been listed, I got this this information from this is why I needed to have my references on the slides. I got this information from somebody who knows more than I do. And a good source. The other thing is when you look and do research on the internet, you really have to look at where did it come from and who paid for that site.
Yeah.
You know, and what are they, you know, what are they selling? So but there are a lot of really good sources of health information. I think this came from one of the gov sites. I forget which one it was, but it did. Surprisingly enough, it came from one government agency or another that was promoting this, and some of the research has really backed this stuff up. And again, we talk about evidence-based medicine. You know, I go back and forth to that.
And it takes time to gather enough evidence for it to become.
Well, it takes time and it takes money.
Yeah.
These studies don't appear out of the blue. And who funds them and why. So here's an interesting piece. Strawberries and raspberries are the only fruits that have their seeds on the outside.
Yeah.
That's a fun fact kind of thing. So orange and yellow, the phytonutrients are alpha carotene, beta carotene, beta cryptozyme, lutein, zeaxanthin, hesperidin. That is pretty long, man.
Yeah.
So some of the benefits are eye health, immune function, healthy immune function, skin hydration, and overall growth and development. So you want to eat yellow grapefruits, cantaloupe, apricots, papayas, peaches, mangoes, yellow and orange bell peppers, sweet potatoes, squash, corn, turmeric, pineapples.
Here's a good question on the, is it the color of the edible part or say like the rind? When you're looking at a grapefruit, sometimes it's, you know,
Well,
yellow or
that
orange.
is a good question because interestingly enough, orange peels have more fiber and antioxidants than the actual fruit.
Huh.
So that's true with oranges. I don't know if that's necessarily true with, because,
Grapefruit.
well, with all the edible, well, it's probably true with grapefruit, but it may not, like, first, some of the squashes, for example, we peel. And, but like some of the squashes have a green rind and they're yellow on the inside. So, so I don't know if that's necessarily true with all rinds. And again,
Need more money.
food and nutrition is not my primary, I still have so a lot to learn myself and a lot to study about it. So green, and everybody always knows that green leafy vegetables are good for you.
Mhm.
And what are the phytonutrients that are good? Lutein, xanthion, isoflavonoids, epigallate, gallate, indole. I'm really mangling these pronunciations. Isos, cyanate, sulfurfuran. I
Now I want to see it.
So they support eye health, arterial function, lung health, liver function, and reduces the risks of certain cancers. Now I was really surprised. This was quite a few years ago, but I was still really surprised that a friend of mine who had some kind of a cancer that he had treated, I think it was a colon cancer. Well, I was really surprised that his cancer specialist, his medical doctor, would talk to him quite a bit about eating broccoli. So it was really surprising. It's really surprising how some of this knowledge has kind of fed into the medical community, and they have learned that. And over I run into this where I have a medical practitioner that will recommend specific kinds of foods as medicine. So this is really this knowledge has really grown. So you want to eat kale, parsley, spinach, collard greens, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, green peas, oregano, celery, limes, green apple, green grapes, avocados, kiwis. So the little fun fact here is green fruits and vegetables get their green pigment from chlorophyll. So, and that's there's a lot that we understand chemically about chlorophyll, and we're looking over in the lab. But again, like all these phytonutrients, there's this fullness and this synergy that happens with all plants and all nature that work in combination with each other in this synergetic fashion that we don't completely understand or we can't quantify. So brown and whites, here's another one, Ethylgalactica chickpea gallet. Allison, your seed indoles, glucose isolate, I don't know. Okay, so those are some specific phytonutrients, but it supports some healthy bones, circulatory systems, and arterial function. So that's things like cauliflower, garlic, mushrooms, horseradish, white kidney beans, pears, ginger, cocoa, potatoes, onions, coconuts. Interestingly enough, mushrooms have their own immune system. And mushrooms have their own immune system. Mushrooms are like an amazing food. like I wanted to spend, what I would have spent a lot of my time on had I had more time for this was really what they call this the superfoods, really talking about some really specific foods and what is some of the benefits of these different foods are. And mushrooms are definitely one of those, both for medicine and for food, and one of the main anti-cancer things.
Yeah.
And mushrooms have also been used to treat specific cancers. And
One
one of the things about mushrooms is also I've been looking because of my age, I've really been looking at all the things to help with cognition, and also because I had the brain injury and have problems with my memory. So I'm always looking at things to enhance memory. Mushrooms are one of those things that they've done research about people who ate mushrooms every day. They would do, they do studies of, they do a group of people and give them mushrooms every day and do a memory test. And, so many months later, they'll do another memory test. And the mushroom eaters tested better than the non-mushroom.
Hearing that
Are there-
rosemary, that's synergistic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there
Now
any
my friend and I
are there any specific types of mushrooms that have been highlighted, or is it just kind of mushrooms in general?
Well, all the edible mushrooms are really specific for memory, but there's specific mushrooms that have been like the lion's mane in particular. Reishi is another one. There's a number of mushrooms that they have done some research on that really that have been really helpful for real specific kinds of things. The study I was referring to were just like the grocery store mushrooms. But lion's mane, I know, has got like an incredible amount of really great properties. And I think mushrooms in general are super healthy, but there's probably some real specific ones. I know that chaga is another one that is like real immune support. It's got a lot of really great properties. Yeah.
But when foraging, don't do it without any knowledge or someone who is
Oh yeah, that's a really good point. She was talking about wild mushroom foraging. You really have to be super knowledgeable. I am very very careful about that, because many years ago I had a friend who had a group of people who was a very experienced mushroom hunter. They were not novices by any means. And they went out and gathered mushrooms and had a stir fry and a dinner party. And one person died and 3 needed liver transplants. And that really stuck with me. That was many, many years ago, but that really stuck with me. And then we did a mushroom hunting expedition with a group of interns here. And I was in the kitchen and watching, and it was just chanterelles, and which are really easy to identify. But there is 1 or 2 mushrooms that can kind of look like chanterelles.
Yeah.
And when I was cleaning them, fortunately, I was really having to spend a lot of time cleaning them. I pulled out some of these dangerous mushrooms in the chanterelle pile. So you really do have your chanterelles. And I would love to grow mushrooms here. I keep doing these mushroom logs, and I have a couple of mushroom logs, and they come out. And one of the things I'd really love to have is to grow mushrooms here on the properties would be ideal.
I've found that the woods along the coastline here grow a lot of lobster, and they are just that bright orange red. They're super easy to identify. I don't know if there's anything poisonous that looks just like lobster. So
Lobsters are super easy to identify, and they've got some really great properties as well. We actually make I used to make a mushroom salt, and I would put the lobster mushrooms in that. So
I don't.
I kind of got a little bit into this. Is a little bit of a goes over to some material that was to talk about just a few of the foods that really boost the immune system. First, I wanted to talk about fermented foods. You know, we think about kombucha, kimchi, and sauerkraut. Remember, I was talking about how did people develop over the course of centuries and centuries, and that process of elimination, and what did the people eat? Well, for how many hundreds of thousands of years that people have been around, did they have refrigeration? Exactly. Almost none of it. It's really been refrigeration has been a relatively recent thing, and fermenting foods has been a big part of that. A big part of how what people did to preserve their foods. And that fermentation process brings in these bacteria, these healthy bacteria. And that's what over and over we keep saying, the importance of probiotics. And, that's like really essential. And, one of the things that I've been doing some research on is how the lack of those probiotics are related to excessive weight gain as well. Is that one of the multitude of factors? I mean, it does come down to you have to eat less and exercise more. I can't get away from that. But there are conditions that make it easier for people to gain and hold on to weight, like your heredity, your and other factors like there's substances in corn syrup, high fructose corn syrups that produce particular chemicals that affect the fat cells, that make the fat cells more hang on to. So that's one of the reasons why sodas, are really bad for people and for hanging on to weight. But one of the things is people's gut bacteria that are really low in people who have weight problems, and then just getting more probiotics. And so you can certainly take a probiotic supplement, and that's a good idea. When the pandemic started, I a lot of people I just boosted a lot of my immune support stuff, and ended up being able to overall helped me prevent all kinds of other stuff, and maybe it prevented me from getting COVID. I don't know, because I've been pretty isolated, so I don't think so. But in any case, it's super important. So the other aspects, yogurt, kefir, those are other kinds of probiotics. So probiotics are just like really key to supporting your immune system. Sometimes I just wanted to throw this out there. If you do have to take antibiotics, where are you at with probiotics? Some people say you shouldn't take antibiotics and probiotics at the same time, that it counteracts the antibiotic. That's not true. Or that it will kill all the probiotics. That's a little bit true. So the best thing to do is, if you have to take an antibiotic, say you're on 3 times a day, you should take probiotics between the times you have to take the antibiotics. So if you take your antibiotic in the morning, sometime between that and your next dose, that's when you should do your big yogurt dose or drink your kombucha. But it's not going to hurt to just do extra probiotics, and some of them will get wiped out by the antibiotics. But then certainly when you're done with your course of your antibiotics, you want to really load up on your probiotics. But probiotics are probably one of the single most things that you can do to increase your immune system and your health. When I first got in my car accident, I had 2 broken legs, and they were both broken really badly. So one of them was an open fracture. And so I had a bunch of surgeries on my legs. And so I had a bunch of open wounds on my legs. And being diabetic and being heavy and having open wounds is not a good combination. Right. So when I was, they were telling me that there was a good chance I was going to lose my legs. And I was like, didn't want to hear that. And when I came home from the hospital, the other thing that I'm really into is white tea. I'll get into that maybe on this today. We'll see. But I made a bunch of I my my helper helped me start making kombucha. With and we made it too. So we made the white tea kombucha, and so I drank lots of kombucha. And I think I attribute not getting an infection or keep being able to keep my legs from that white tea kombucha. That's my I think that made a difference. So garlic and onions is the other thing that is just like a really key thing. I make a couple of things. I make one of the other things on bone broth, and you know, there's been research, as you probably all heard, that chicken soup has actually antiviral properties. Actually, has been shown to be good for colds. I make a chicken soup where I slow whole chicken to get a lot of the bone broth, and then add lots and lots of garlic, lots and lots of onions. As well as cayenne and peppers and lemon and ginger, and it's kind of a treatment soup. So I really feel like if anybody's for cold and flu, this soup is really really makes a difference. When my kids were growing up, whenever they get sick, I would make this soup, and then they'd be in the other room, you know, watching TV or whatever. And oh, Mom, I don't feel very well. I mean, well, did you eat more soup? And they're like, oh, your soup doesn't help. Then they would move away, and then they call me and go, Mom, I'm sick. I need your soup.
That's proof.
Yes. But one of them called and asked for the recipe. That was actually better.
Yeah.
So nettles. I can't say enough about nettles. Nettles is one of the best foods. If I'm going to talk about food as medicine, nettles is a really huge one. Nettles has lots and lots of amazing. It's really good for allergies. It is a fantastic medicine for lots of things. And it's also really good in. We put it in soup. You can dry it, and dried nettles you can add to soup as well. You could make steamed nettles. I've seen people make nettle pesto.
Oh, yeah.
So you can do a lot with nettles. So I'm super into nettles as is one of the great plants that are good for your immune system. Of course, we know about citrus, vitamin C, being the big thing for immune systems, and that includes bell peppers, lots of other fruit too. But and then you have your broccoli and your kale and your spinach, the bone broths, and then there's specific herbs or kind of or goes along with like spices like ginger and turmeric. Turmeric that is pretty amazing for your immune system as well. And then there's your berries, blueberries, elderberries. There's a whole blackberries. All of those have immune systems. And then there's fire cider. So your apple cider vinegar is high in probiotics, and your most highest probiotic have the mother in it. So that's actually growing. That means it hasn't been pasteurized. So you can get it in the health food store, a place like Fred Meyer where it'll say on the jar that. So you can just take a jar of that, put it in the quart jar, and put in garlic, any of these things that boost your immune system. I make a version with nettles. as well. So I can put nettles in there, cayenne. It's usually made with the reason why they call it fire cider is because you want the peppers in there. I also put uh, horseradish. So we had a thing at Standing Rock. One of the things we did is we had we gave people what we called the daily special, which was a shot of fire cider followed by a shot of elderberry syrup. Because lots of people were super sick. They didn't have very many hand washing stations, and there were a lot of people who smoked, and we were all in these little tents and teepees and yurts and in really close spaces. And people were getting sprayed all the time with tear gas. So there was lots of respiratory illnesses that we saw, and we really just treated a lot of it with. We went through a lot of fire cider, and it's really easy to make. Now, some people put honey in their fire cider. That's the traditional way to make it, and it really balances out that vinegar. There are really important enzymes in it. Is one of those foods like those synergistic whole foods that have got things like enzymes and phytonutrients and other things. Well, not phytonutrients, but they're not a plant. They're not a nutrient. It has some kind of mystery things that are good for you.
It isn't for a plant, but there are recipes you can find on making vegan dandelion honey, and then you're extracting all of the medicinal benefits of that plant. So look that up online if you're interested. I think it's under Mountain Reserve.
Yeah, that's it.
If you really don't want to take the bees honey, I mean.
Well,
And
the
honey
only
doesn't
thing
go bad.
that's kind of as a counterweight to having the honey and the fire ciders is that honey is an antibacterial.
Yeah.
So you will kill a certain amount. You'll have less probiotics in your fire cider with the honey. So I make 2 fire ciders that we make for sale. One is called Tonagret, and it's and we had a discussion one time with another herbalist here, and we were talking about master herbs, and those were the things that are like so great that they were good for so many things. And the master herbs that we discussed were cayenne, garlic, nettles, and apple cider vinegar. And I thought, oh, why did put all those together easily enough? And so we did, but we don't add honey to that. So that's the one for immune support. And that's the one that I have used really successfully to keep me from getting sick for years. When Jordan over here got strep throat a couple of weeks ago, I thought, strep throat is super contagious, and really oftentimes antibiotics will keep you from spreading it, keep you from getting more sick. But I really didn't want to, I'm not a big fan of taking antibiotics, obviously. So I started to, my throat started to get sore. I thought, oh no, I said I'll go the weekend before going in and getting it tested. And I just did the fire cider, the Tonagret, boosted my vitamin C, gargled, did my little immune support tincture, and I was fine. It made 2-3 days. And it's the same thing, like whenever I feel like I'm getting a cold or I'm getting any kind of infection in my body, because I tend to get these, if I can catch it right before I get sick early enough, the fire cider is like one of the biggest immune boosters. So I do, when I'm trying to get the most amount of immune support, I'll do the one that without the honey. But I'll do the honey is just a normal preventative thing.
But
And
it's something that anybody could make, and
anybody can make it. It's super easy. You put the herbs in a jar with the vinegar, let it soak, strain the herbs off. There you go.
and you don't have to have the mother. You can just get like Bragg's or something
Yeah,
that
and you like Bragg's. Yeah, just get a bottle of Bragg's, a quart jar or a gallon. Make a gallon if you're gonna, give some away to a sick friend. or you can buy it from us, you know. People, I think that's the thing. One of the reasons why I want to retire from the business is Standing Rock really spoiled me for selling stuff, because people donated all of these incredible herbs, all these incredible medicines, and people would come and I would say, oh, here's, you know, this or that, you know, because they're giving it to you because you're a water protector. And I just love giving medicines away. You know, it was like so much better than selling things. So, so I wish the people I have to pay my bills to.
Would you take herbs? You would train
Bills,
them?
yeah. You take that for my electric bill. Okay, so foods that reduce inflammation. And I really looked a lot at that because I have this traumatic arthritis from my accident. That I really, and that's how I developed the kale sprinkles, which I still have some left, but you have to call me for them because we took them off the website because I stopped making them commercially. But I started making them looking at foods that I wanted to eat a lot of that were really good for inflammation, like kale, obviously, garlic, onions, all those are
Cinnamon, right?
no, cinnamon is good for inflammation. Actually, cinnamon is one of the things that's actually better for blood sugar.
Yeah.
It's a really good blood sugar one. Turmeric, that's one of the really big anti-inflammatories. Tomatoes. Olive oil.
But kale sprinkles is like dried so
Yeah,
that you
it's
can
dry.
get it without having to eat this big salad.
Right. And you can put it on everything.
Strange you said tomato. I had a friend who suffered from really massive psoriasis and they put her on I think it's called FODMAP, something to reduce inflammation in your diet and see how it affects your skin and whatever. And one of the things they said was avoid nightshade.
Well, the difference, especially with skin conditions, some people who have like eczema, certain kinds of skin conditions, do have sensitivities to nightshades, but that's different than inflammation.
Okay.
So tomatoes are one of the really good things for inflammation, but again, there's always going to be some variables. Olive oil, we know that one of the reasons why I use olive oil in a lot of my medicines as opposed to other oils is not only is it one of the more stable oils, but olive leaf from the tree has medicinal properties, and olive oil in and out by itself has got medicinal properties. So, again, we're talking about these phytonutrients, this whole species, this plant has got really great stuff in it. So nuts, almonds, walnuts, fatty fish, sardines, salmon, mackerel, tuna, fruits, strawberries, blueberries, cherries, oranges, spices like ginger, fennel, parsley, oregano, cinnamon, garlic, rosemary, turmeric.
That's fennel, like the fronds, but not the rooty part.
The root as well.
Okay. The whole thing. Okay.
So I could have really gone on about foods that are good for different conditions, but
Did you hear?
yeah, I did. So we didn't get to that. I didn't get to that. So people can do their own research on those things. But this, I just wanted to cover this word diet. It's kind of a funny. I got this in here, but I do want to recognize that term is somewhat triggering. Is a good word, but for the lack of anything else, so ancestral food food plan. So anyway, nutritional. So an ancestral diet is a nutritional plan which is based on the foods that your ancestors consumed. So that's what the theoretical thing of paleo diets are. Although that's if people did any kind of research, that's not necessarily true. But um, uh, but
Well, like maybe like so like Jewish and their tendency for like crowns. So they have certain.
so there's certain genetic dispositions, and here's some examples. So the makeup of your ancestors' diet varied on their location. So people in the far north where it's really cold, they ate a lot of, say, fishes with heavy fatty oils because they needed to keep warm. The northern plain people ate a lot of, they needed a lot of high protein, and they had very cold winters, so they really needed a lot of dried meat in their diet because that was the only way that they could store that much food to go through the winter. They had so that's what we're talking about in terms of ancestral diets. So there's some fairly limited evidence. There isn't there isn't a lot of evidence about this, but I thought it was interestingly enough to cover. The people who follow kind of ancestral diets do better than people who is a better or healthier plan for them. So another example is like indigenous people didn't have very much carbohydrates in their diets. They had a fairly low carbohydrates, where Europeans had a lot of grains and heavy carbohydrates. So for generation after generation, the same thing with alcohol. A lot of people used beer was a source of nutrition for many people for thousands and thousands. That's fermented, and the water was not always healthy, and so people drank beer all the time, and not necessarily in quantities to get drunk, but just as part of their daily diet. Interestingly enough, the pyramids were built not by slaves but by workers, and they were paid in beer.
Ale.
They got was part of their payment. And that's one of the reasons why it wasn't really in the Americas. There wasn't a food tradition of big grain productions and fermenting grains and alcohol. So when alcohol hit, a lot of the indigenous people, they just didn't have the ancestral components to that, and it affects us very differently. The same thing with why indigenous people oftentimes have a lot of problems with their weight and diabetes because of eating a lot of the flour, and of course, native people, one of the big indigenous foods here is fry bread. And I have to admit, took quite a few pounds of mine over fry bread.
That's masa, right? It's like corn.
Well, that's what fry bread is. The masa and corn tortillas are healthy and fine, and that's the original indigenous food. But when American natives were wiped out and their food sources were that they lived a lot on their hunting and fishing and food and foraging and food gathering. When all that was wiped out, they were given flour and lard to replacement, and that's why fried bread it's a cultural thing not, it's a more recent food rather than an ancient food. So that's one of the things that is this growing movement on in a lot of the indigenous on the reservations and in indigenous communities, is to look at, okay, what are, you know, it's kind of like beyond fry bread. What are some other ancient foods that people, people are starting to use acorns, and on this coast, acorn flour was a big thing in the Californias area. That was a big source of food. So there's lots of other native foods that people have moved very far away from, that people are now just kind of rediscovering and working towards. And it's a really great movement.
Filbert flour, I think. I was gonna try it.
Well, any kind of nut flours, yeah, nut flours are all really, all super healthy.
I did some filbert harvesting and I have a whole bunch of them, and I was gonna just for fun try to grind it up in a little hand grinder
Yeah,
to try it out. So.
yeah, absolutely.
And the pineapple weed flowers, I heard you also can make a flour.
Oh, I haven't ever done that. So there are definitely lots of different kinds of foods that we can do. So we have always I always have a lot of respect for people who have, this is the word diet again, diet discipline or diet dogma. So I have a lot of respect for people who have a diet discipline, who are, who follow, like they're vegan, or, a strict vegetarian, or a strict, whatever, whatever their thing is, because I know how difficult it is to follow any kind of a food. So I have a lot of respect for them. On the other hand, when you follow those kinds of diets, that they're expensive. And they, I really, it's something that people generally are able to follow if they are privileged. So it's, it's harder to follow certain kinds of strict, those kinds of strict diets when you have a limited income. And so I think it's important to recognize that. I also think that sometimes people get on their thing. That's why I call it a diet dogma. They're on their thing, whether it's being a vegan or whatever other, whatever other philosophy. And it's like a religion. They're support, they find other people to support their viewpoint. They only read material that supports their viewpoint. And like they don't really recognize certain things, like there's no indigenous vegans ever in the world. I'm picking on vegans, but I don't necessarily mean vegans. It could be paleo, it could be, there's not really microbiotics anymore, but when I was young, there was microbiotics. But people follow whatever particular thing that they're into, even if it's a Mediterranean diet, which is a very, a very inclusive and easy thing. But what it doesn't matter what the specifics are, it's whether or not people use it as, whether they get these kind of blinders on. That's what I'm talking about, the dogma, whether they have and they become self-righteous zealots, where they feel like if you don't follow this particular thing that I follow, then there's something wrong with you.
Well, it's almost like they're saying you're just ignorant to what's going on around you too. And
Right.
you could easily be supporting local people who have good practices. and still
Exactly.
Consuming those certain products.
And then also it comes with a certain amount of judgment. And I certainly get that as a fat person. People assume that I drink Coke and eat potato chips. They didn't really know that I got this fat on eating, you know, a lot of cheese and brown rice, you know. um, so um, so you don't. It's a matter of if you're wanting to help others, then I think it's really important that you recognize that you whatever path that you're on in terms of your food is a personal path, like your own spiritual journey, your own journey of how you what you come to, and it should evolve. You know, you should go through a period of, like, when I was younger, I was a vegan, and you know, well, raw foods. I went through a raw food phase, you know, or I went through a macrobiotic phase, and you know, like I followed different things, the same as, you know, lived in a Krishnamurti community. I lived in a kind of a born again Christian community. And, you know, I've done, a bunch of different spiritual journeys in the course of my life, um, to find what works best for me. And that's what people should, it's okay to follow and be strict on a particular path, but the same way as you don't want to have people tell you what who tells you, you know, tells you should believe a certain thing about your spiritual path. There's nothing more annoying than having, um, uh, for me, is having somebody give me dietary advice. They're telling me about their friend who lost 50 pounds for being a vegan. I can't, I wish I had a dollar for it, or I lost a pound for every person who ever tried to give me dietary advice.
You
It's,
disappear.
yeah, well, the thing is that it's, it's assuming that you know more than somebody else, and that um, it's self-righteous and demeaning
Yeah.
other people.
Well, you won't reach somebody if you're telling them because you put them here and you're here.
Exactly. On the other hand, if you are wanting to be in a position where you want to be a health educator, and you want to share with your friends or families, or you decide you become some level of a health practitioner, then teaching people about nutrition and diet and health is totally valid. So what you want to do is you want to come from a place of accepting where people are and making suggestions if they ask and you're having this conversation.
Right.
Like, for example, when I was at Standing Rock, somebody came to our booth and was drinking the big soda and was looking for something for a headache. And one of the well-meaning um, people, white privileged people that were here helping, said to him, "Well, if you wouldn't be drinking that sugar and that soda, you wouldn't have a headache." Now he came in looking for an aspirin.
Yeah.
So you know, and I had some white willow, I had some other stuff. So I was like, had to kind of shoo this person aside, and then I felt like I had to intervene, and told them, well, we have white willow, we have aspirin, what would you prefer? We have ibuprofen, what do you want? So we got anything and stuff, and then I had to turn around and explain to the person that if he would have asked and wanted something, that telling somebody don't drink that soda, that's soda's causing you problems, that may be true, but that's not going to change that. But what is going to change it is to give people alternatives that are within that category. Like I was telling you about your husband who drinks soda and has got a heart issue. If you do iced tea has got all kinds of phytonutrients that are really good for the health, really good for the heart, and even sweet iced tea with sugar that you can get in any convenience store then somebody wouldn't have to go through going from drinking Coca-Cola to drinking water or something else. If they go to drinking Coke to drinking iced tea, they'll still get the sugar, they'll still get the caffeine, because that's, you know, part of that process. And it's a step in that, you know, it's a step in that direction. Then gradually they can move to drinking drinking it without drinking
Cane sugar.
unsweetened iced
Yeah.
tea. So, you know, the way to get somebody off of sugar, drinking sugar soda, is not to say, oh, you shouldn't drink sugar soda because sugar soda is so bad for you. And, you know, most
bring it
people
up.
have some basic nutritional knowledge. Some people have more, some people have less, but generally people know what's good for them. And they have a variety of reasons why they make the choices that they do. And people make choices about their health and about their life that are different than the choices that we would make. And when you have a judgment on people based on what you would do, then that is part of that kind of colonizing mindset of, and that self-righteous mindset, and that mindset of, I'm better than you, and therefore you should do what I say because I'm so, yeah.
I just want to add to that too. People often don't think about the situation a stranger could be in. You never know. He could be choosing the lesser evil. Maybe he was an alcoholic.
Right.
And he's saying, you know, I used to love my rum and Coke, but now I just drink the Coke. It has no sugar. I drink the diet one, plus it has caffeine. You don't know like what's going on in someone's life. They could have been really proud of themselves for drinking that soda. You just
Right.
don't know. You're
It's-
passing judgment on somebody without having any background. Not that that's okay if you do know them or not, but
That's a really good point. It reminds me of something that one of my herbalist friends who works in Occupy Medical,
yeah.
which is and she was talking about someone who was putting a whole lot of sugar in their coffee or tea, and she went and unthinkingly said something about it, and he said, yeah, I really do a lot of sugar, but it's so much better than the meth.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
And then you're looking at someone who has an addiction problem. They have an addictive personality. They're going to hop from one thing to the other, you know, whether it's cookies or drugs, you know, you get your fix somehow.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Our
I
bodies are
come-
so resilient too.
yeah, like I come from a family of addicts, and if I wouldn't have started on midwifery so young, I could have gone down another path. Although occasionally I wish I had like an addiction, like smoking that, or exercising, or even something like smoking that didn't show. You know, so everybody can look at me and see where my addiction is. So
There was like you were saying, someone telling someone else how they need to do it, completely just robbing them of their food sovereignty, like the act of like, or the action or being sovereign is I'm in charge.
exactly. So yeah, when you I think the word you're looking at is for agency. When you put your values on someone else, that takes away their agency. So their values may be very different from yours. And that's certainly what we've seen when we had, you know, when Europeans came over and took over indigenous people and did a cultural genocide and took away their spiritual practices, you know, cut their hair, put them in boarding schools, all of those things. And then also changed the way that they ate. They took away their source of food of, you know, they wiped out the buffalo, you know, in particular to wipe out those native people. It's been a long standing tactic of warfare to cut the enemy's supply line. So, you know, killing the buffalo was really specific about wiping out, you know, wiping people out. And So we're getting off again. I want to get to the tour here. So we're almost, we're just about to, we're, we're winding down here. So the other thing is that sometimes mental health issues are tied to food. You know, like anorexia is the one that people, you know, think about, but it can, you know, there's people who have specific biochemical mental mental health issues that are, anorexia. So those are all, those can be, factors. What I've kind of come to after all of these years of studying and working with nutrition and people and all of these years of doing all this is to really simplify things. And I really like David Pollan. I took a lot of ideas from him, as well as, a lot of other, nutrition people, and have really, so I've come to where I'm at my ideal, again, we're using the word diet, a flexitarian diet, which is you eat mostly plants, occasionally eat things that eat plants, and stay away from foods that are made in plants. Like made in plants like factories.
Oh, okay.
So eating mostly plants. Now, over and over and over, we have really good evidence, multi-years, 20, 30-year studies of people who, indigenous people who live in certain parts of the countries that have low cancer rates and high, live a long time, these green zones with a lot of centenarians. And what are those things that they have in common is they have a mostly plant diet. So that's, and it's mostly all whole grains. That's where you get into the Mediterranean diet where there's, your oils and, and then over and over and over, we see the benefits of largely plant diets. So that's pretty obvious, obviously. Occasionally, and then the next one is occasionally eat things that eat. So that's things like, chicken or eggs if you're a vegetarian. I mean, people can skip that if they're really married to being a vegan. I think one of the things that I, as a midwife, I worked with vegan moms and saw some not so good outcomes. And because I'm an indigenous person, and I also really believe in looking at historical and ancestral traditions, I really don't see that. I look at what's happened in these green zones that I'm talking about. There's areas in the coast, in Europe and in Japan and different places in the world where they've really looked at all these people who lived over 100, where they're super healthy, and there's all of these things. When you look at people from different cultural backgrounds, different parts of the world, what do they have in common in terms of their eating habits and their lifestyle habits? And one of those is that they eat largely plants, and they all eat some amount of fish and a small amount of meat. Obviously factory farming is like really bad for the planet. So, and I eat too much factory meat myself. So, I don't think that that's necessarily the healthiest. And I think I would be, I would probably lose weight and do better with eating less factory farm meats. The planet would certainly do better. But if you look at cattle or buffalo that are allowed to free range, they're little, when they poop, it brings seeds from point A to point B, and their hoofs break down the soil. So they actually are good for the planet as opposed to putting them in little factors. So eat mostly plants, occasionally things that eat plants, and stay away from foods that are made in plants. So that's, anything that comes in a factory or a box. And I know that people are really into this fake meat that's coming out now.
Yeah.
All the plant-based things, and I had one not too long ago, one of these Impossible burgers, and it's great. They do kind of taste like a hamburger. And if we're working about getting away from factory farms, there are some benefits to that. There may be some benefits that they're plant-based. On the other hand, are they? How plant-based are they? Remember we were talking about phytonutrients? Like a beet that comes out of your garden that you pickle or preserve, as opposed to a beet that's processed to act like a hamburger, is a completely different. Those are different things.
And possibly preservatives and chemicals added
Right.
to them as
And
well.
possible preservatives are added. So every time you process something, you change it.
You get away from that whole.
You get away from the whole. So really the other part of that I think is really key is what if you want to come back to a sense of wholeness, of that you can step towards moving towards foods that are whole. As that's your, the less processing, the least processing that you can get away with, the more and the closer to things that come naturally are going to be the healthiest. And I think that is last slide. Oh yeah, that was. So we're going to go ahead and do a tour. Do we want to have another 5-minute break before the tour? What do you think, Katie? Or should we just move to
I
the tour?
think that sounds pretty reasonable. Allow people a chance to stand up and stretch.
So do we want to do another 10 minutes?
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's all meet back here at 4 o'clock even. We're 3 minutes away from 3:50. So
Okay, yeah, at 4 o'clock, and I went a little bit longer than I thought. We'll do a little tour. I don't know if I'm hoping to get out of here before 5, so I don't get too distracted. All right.
All right.
See you at 4.
Let me go plug this in again.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking I need to probably cut out now that we're done with the slides.
Yeah,
I have
that's fine.
I think that you probably want to mute your phone so that the whole conversation.
How about that? Here we go. Okay, you're recording. So are we back?
Yeah, go ahead and if you can put it on here, the water, and you might want to go back to the water. It's going to come right about here.
Oh.
Make an adjustment on that, but for right now, I'm going to leave it. So I just wanted to, the permaculture is a philosophy of working with rather than against nature, of protracted and thoughtful observation, and to try to keep the amount of labor down, and looking at plants and animals at all their functions rather than treating any area as a single product system. So a lot of the permaculture stuff is in different zones. So this is zone 1, which is like all my gardens needs a lot of maybe I'll go this way. A lot of work. But it's the things that I use most often: salad greens and herbs for the kitchen. So one of the permaculture plan. Out of the water for here is one of the things that they say to you should have your zone 1 of the things that you use most often. If you come out to snip herbs for your morning omelet, that your fuzzy slippers don't get wet. So it should be closest to your house. So that's what that one over here is. These two are Euloculture beds. And this one is we've got some melons that are going to be coming up in there, and we've also we've got some onions from the fall that we're just about to harvest, and strawberries. And Euloculture beds are, there's big logs underneath and pieces of wood underneath, and the breakdown of logs helps create an environment like a forest floor, and also like a rotten log holds a lot of water. So Euloculture beds are a technique used a lot in permaculture in permaculture homesteads.
So then bury the logs, put the dirt, and then kind of make a raised.
A raised bed. Usually they're just like lumps. I went and kind of did a terracing thing with that as opposed to one big pile.
Okay.
So that's what that is. And there's lots of places that need lots of weeds. If any of you Portland people ever want to come down and hang out with us and weed, we on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I have my intern days, and we're always doing weeding products. So weeding that needs to be done here. So this is some of my camas that's already bloomed, but I'm super into having camas is one of the big food crops for the Calapoola people. So I'm really into having as many
Which one
native
is?
plants. This is the camas here. And it's going to produce some seeds here. So what I'm trying to do is we'll pull some of this lemongrass out of here and mint here soon. And when these camas go to seeds, I want to have a little bit more camas. And our pond here, that azoe is an algae that's edible. And right now there's just a bunch of lovage in there, but there's some other I don't have any water lettuce in here now, but some of these plants will also be able to feed the chickens. And then there's some goldfish in there, and it produces poop in there, and then that produces some water, some fish fertilizer. And we use the water in this for our compost tea.
And what is this one?
Oh, that one is comfrey. And comfrey is a super important permaculture plant. It's a really great medicinal, but it's also really good for mulch. And a comfrey will heal sick plants. So we make our compost tea where we use it for comfrey. It's like it's super high, and I gotta try to avoid doing this, but every time I walk by I'm gonna try to not weed as we go by, because we won't get very far in the tour. Oh, you were asking about dock. This is a dock.
This is a dock.
Yeah.
Is that the yellow dock?
That's yellow. Yeah.
Oh, that's the beaver worm bins.
And Jordan planted these nasturtiums over here, so that's actually kind of a little bit different. Oh, and he's got his coffee cup over here. That's kind of funny. So over here are some of our other worm bins, and this one in particular, you can see has got like a little trap where I call it worm juice, but The worm castings and the water kind of filter in there. The spigot needs to be fixed. You'll see a lot of things around here on our tour of things that need to be fixed. And one of the things about doing an urban homestead, it's kind of like any kind of a farm. There's, there's a lot of work involved. And I really encourage people to start small and to keep it reasonable to what you can manage, because I get a little overwhelmed here sometimes. And then if I get a roommate that isn't super helpful, then things go kind of downhill. And I'm pretty dependent on other people because of my limitations, and that makes things a little bit tougher to
Yeah.
keep up with. But this is a dead freezer, and the bottom half is cut out. And so we have red wiggler worms in the bottom of that. And then we'll throw in compost, weeds. The nice thing is it's essentially like a worm bin is like a compost bin, but a compost bin, you need to have more brown. You need to have 3 parts brown to 1 part green. The reverse is true with a worm bin. So you can use a lot more green with a worm bin, and then you get these great worm castings. And we use the worm castings in our compost tea. And I don't buy fertilizer. We make it all ourselves with our compost tea.
So it's all natural fertilizer.
Yeah, it's all fertilizer. It's essentially free.
Yes.
So the other thing that what I'm doing here is I've got this blank area of the ground, which is going to get weeds. Any blank spot is going to get weeds. The thing about pumpkin, I can pull it out just to be almost nothing there, and it's going to come right back. But when I'm putting this mulch down here, this mulch, you guys were talking about guerrilla gardening. While it isn't a food thing, pumpkin is a great plant for fertilizer. So if you planted something, say, you've got a vacant lot and you're planting some fruit trees or some other food crop, if you plant some comfrey, you don't have to worry about fertilizing, and it'll lower your weeding. You just pull all this plant here, and then there we have free mulch that is
Fertilizer.
free fertilizing mulch.
Wow.
That's your comfrey
Yep.
plant. See? And there we've got a mulch there.
Less space for weeds to grow.
Right. It keeps the weeds down. Adds that. Right
Which-
now we have for pets and manure, but because of my prepper tendency, if the shift hits the fan and we really need, if I was that hungry and we really needed to start eating them, I'd find somebody with a male bunny, and for a property this size, in order to be as self-sufficient as possible and grow enough protein on, a quarter of an acre, rabbits are really the way to go, because that's the most amount of protein for the least amount of space. But we don't eat these particular rabbits. But if I was hungry enough and people were hungry enough, we would.
I've got those kind of rabbits, and I love them because they're cute, but the rabbit meat, you actually have the most amount of protein it's the leanest meat of any other kind. I think gator was another one, but
Yeah, it's super healthy. There's some hops over there. Would you mind? Let's turn this water on for these sweetgrass. We just get this bed. We got some butterfly peas, and
sweet.
go ahead and turn that. Go ahead and turn that on for me. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Start. Is the little water thing? Is the little
Yeah, it's on.
So,
So do you use a lot of
behind the-
watering drip
I'll have
systems
some of
or?
that. And we just pulled everything out of this bed. Here we go. We're on now.
All right.
And that's gonna lower the,
You had a question. We have a question.
okay, what was your question?
Oh, just do you use a lot of like automatic like dripper system watering or like?
Well, I wish I could afford more of the
Yeah.
automatic ones. They're expensive. So I have a lot of the
Yeah.
hand ones because one of the things I found is that it's easier to remember to turn stuff on than to turn stuff off. So I had that
Mhm.
automatic one that went on right at 4 in the zone 1. And like every year I try to buy another one of the battery ones, but the hand one, so she just turned the hand one on. I'm trying to get the hand ones more propped up so I can turn them on, so I'm not as
Mhm.
dependent on other people watering. But that's
Mhm.
kind of,
We've got this over here too.
what was that?
The
Oh, we spent up the compost tea. Thank you. I'm glad I have Shelby over here. Go ahead and show them in the compost tea bucket. Go and open it up and show them. Compost tea is looking like.
come on. There we go.
Mm.
I'll tell you about- So what we do with this compost
It's
tea
got-
is we add pond water, we add regular water, a bucket of comfrey. We also add molasses. Because it needs the sugar, and you see that little pump in there. It's just like an aeration. Now it's really important that you have a bubbler or a aeration, so otherwise you get anaerobic bacteria, and that's bad. So if it has oxygen, then it's a living compost tea. So then we have put some of the worm castings in there as well, and then I add mycorrhizals, which I do buy, so it's not completely free. I was wrong. I add the mycorrhizals, and once in a while there'll be some other kind of store-bought fertilizer that somebody will donate. I may throw some of that in, but primarily we add the comfrey, the worm castings, the pond water, the molasses, and then
Soon rabbit.
soon we'll be adding the rabbit manure. I don't add the chicken manure because it's a little bit too hot.
Yeah, it's really hot.
So here's some different herbs that I have growing, and sometimes things kind of take over. There's some wormwood right here. There's a bunch of
Horseradish.
horseradish, and then I'm really interested in growing, trying to grow for kind of for seeds and for experience various native foods, and these are oxa, which are these little they're like Peruvian potato things that let's see,
It looks like clover.
kind of looks like clover. Well, these ones aren't ready, but sometimes I find one that's ready. Yeah, here we go. And they're really good. They're kind of like a jicama. You can eat them raw or you can eat them cooked. They get a little bit bigger. This is, they don't get super big, but they're one of the things that kind of potatoes started out.
Or this is the plant that you thought that you think.
Oh, that's the tea. I forgot about that. So that's a green tea. And there's a difference between white tea, green tea, and black tea is how it's processed. So there's the tea plant, although there's varieties, various tea plants like jasmine or whatever. But white tea are young tea plant tea leaves that aren't processed. Those are the highest in the antioxidants, but they don't taste very good. They're generally put in tea blends. We tincture it. We put it in our herbal medicine. I put it in my kombucha. Green tea is roasted and black tea is roasted and fermented. Black tea is the highest in caffeine. So every time you process a plant, it changes it. So if you're trying to get the caffeine, fermenting it and roasting it gets the most caffeine, totally changes its flavor. But all tea has quite a lot of those phytonutrients. One of the big things for cancer prevention, all of that. And
Oh,
this
this,
are kiwis here. And one thing I really love about the kiwis is that they don't ripen until like, we don't harvest them till right before the last freeze. So we have kiwis on the vine until like November or December. So when all the other fruit has come and gone, we've got these kiwis. Kiwis, you have to have a male and a female.
this one, I thought this was probably a good one to
Oh, the horseradish, not the horseradish,
horsetail.
horsetail. Yeah, the horsetail is so one of the really ancient herbs, and we make something for your hair with it. It's got a high in silica, so it's good for your hair and your nails. It's also good for your kidneys.
So it grows in the water and
Area is not necessarily in the water, but in that particular case, it grows in
Okay.
the water. And over here is the vegetable garden. Which, like all the gardens here, you know, need a little bit, a lot of weeding and some work, and we've been kind of struggling with our watering system this year. This is a bad. So these orange flowers are calendula, and I use a lot of calendula in all of my different medicines. And I'm not going to try to fight to get over those hoses. I'll just stop it here and turn around. But calendula is really good for your stomach stuff. It is, and it also fights bugs. So it's a really good thing to put like in the corners of your beds. And the nice thing about it is like, we just went in and harvested a bunch of this calendula, and there's still a whole bunch of flowers. So
Yeah.
you can keep harvesting these flowers through the whole season. Against that wall, we have the peas. See, we've got some comfrey here, and we can use that comfrey there. Is kind of convenient for putting out for mulch. Had asparagus and strawberries on the back bed. And this, against this back wall, is our Three Sisters bed, which is the corn. It's corn, and then we're going to be planting beans here. We're waiting for the corn to get up. About that point, probably next Thursday, we'll plant the beans, and then so the beans will go up the corn stalks, and then there's a couple of squashes, and the squash will shape tradition.
I had just read about that. That's really super
Yeah.
interesting.
So that's
What are you doing with the eggshells?
oh, the eggshells, I need to put those out. They're in the sun right now to kill any bacteria so we don't get salmonella, but they're you put crushed shells around the we'll sprinkle them around the plants to keep the snails out. It's kind of like we want to crush them up pretty fine, so when the snails don't like, it's like walking over crushed grass. And then we have the raspberries over here. I'm not exactly sure. Jordan was really good about starting projects and leaving them half done all over the place. So I think that's what that was.
We might have
Those
to-
onions are now compost, but at one point he might have to be able to use them. Oh, don't forget to take your onions too,
I won't.
Shelby.
There's
Um,
sun-dried onions right there.
Oh yeah, we dehydrated some already this year.
So this guy,
Oh, that's borage. And borage is really good for the bees, and the flowers are really nice to put in salads. It does tend to spread a lot. So you have to kind of weed it out from places. But I don't have bees currently. But I've had them on the property, and that's because my beekeeper moved, but I'd like to have bees again so we can have honey again.
me too.
Yeah, my daughter has, her and her husband both work full time, and she lives up near Portland. She has a whole thing like this with lots of gardens, and she has little baby goats and bees. I can't imagine how she does it all. So we have a bunch of beets in here, and some and some um, flattered.
Mustard
Oh yeah,
greens.
you were talking about guerrilla gardening. There's another plant I just got that's called Good King Henry, and it's a permaculture spinach. So and the other one was over a bit where the water was. So I didn't show you. It's a New Zealand spinach. So perennial spinaches are another thing that you could plant. You want to plant perennial vegetables. There's a kind of a tree, like a collared kale tree. King Robert and New Zealand spinach would be some, and tiger nuts would be another one that would be.
Tiger nuts?
I thought it would be super cool to have the grape arbor over the chickens. I have this fantasy that the grapes were going to fall in to get the chicken, drop down to the chickens, and because I read it on a chicken forum, and what ended up happening is the chickens was super wet for the chickens, and they didn't get any sun. So this was not one of my better moves. I have to actually get rid of these grapes. But I also have these things called hackberries, which are these things, and this is a really nice vine, and these aren't quite ripe, but when you open it up, I don't know if you can really see this. When you open it up, there's this edible seed pod in here. These hackberries. These are hostas, and hostas, that's another guerrilla plant.
So this guy and this guy.
Yeah, hostas are shade tolerant, and they're also nice, and they'll expand, but they're edible in the early spring.
Oh, the leaves?
So here's our chicken.
This is a hosta as well.
The fence, they don't look at the dirty.
And this one right here,
Oh, that's part of the honeysuckle.
honeysuckle.
And we, this great big plant over here.
Lilac tree.
So that one's lilac. This is elecampane. It's one of the better herbs for the respiratory system, and it gets really huge. And over here, you can't really see it, but it was looks like a peace sign. I don't know if you can raise it high enough. You can see there's parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Although it's parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme.
Should I walk over?
Yeah, you can walk over and show the blueberries and
Blueberries and strawberries.
yeah.
Here's a parsley. When the parsley seeds, it's got a dill kind of look.
Yeah, it does have a dill kind of look. One of the things I did when
Sage,
being a
Sage.
prepper, and
rosemary.
when I was first putting in all these blueberry bushes, which has been about 10 years now, these blueberries and strawberries and berries, I thought, well, and this is a kind of a prepper mentality where you store food to prepare for, the zombie apocalypse, that, what would happen if the zombies came and ate all my blueberries? And what I came to is to plant more blueberries. So if people or a homeless person or whatever really want some blueberries, they're welcome to come and eat some blueberries.
This is a lot of blueberries.
Yeah, they're around here.
They fill up on the blueberries, they won't eat us.
Or the strawberries or whatever. I can understand though. Oh, this one is currants. This currant is having a little bit of a hard time. It's having a lot of aphid problems, but we do have some.
Yeah, this doesn't.
Yeah, this one's got some bugs in it. We sprayed it, but we need to respray it and cut it back. But notice there's some.
And you spray with
what we spray with is we have our own mix of um, dish soap, neem, and
Neem oil.
neem oil, water, a little bit of dish soap so it sticks, and that's pretty effective. Sometimes I'll buy commercial. There's like organic
A BT.
Perithium.
Mm.
You know, I'm trying to grow some perithium, so I use that. I'm trying to grow as much as I can because those organic sprays are expensive. Do a hit on this one. This is goldenrod. It's really good for allergies. A lot of the plants that I grow will kind of also turn into weeds. So sometimes they'll grow in places I don't want. That's a little baby blueberry that needs,
This is interesting.
yeah. I think
No, it doesn't look like a blueberry plant,
it may,
but
it may be another form of a berry.
that looks like, yeah.
It may be another berry. It may be a service berry or something. I can't remember what I planted there. We just planted some Spilanthes. I don't think my water system looks like it's eating over these poor Spilanthes. Don't look so good. I'm going to be out here tomorrow. Looks like I might have to hand water these. Look
Oops.
over here.
Get my shadow. Spilanthes is good for.
Oh, it's good for toothaches. It makes your mouth numb. So over here we've got
Just the
some
leaves.
yeah. We've got the feverfew, which is another allergy thing.
Oops,
We have looks like some volunteer parsley. There was some
This is the feverfew.
yeah. There was some marshmallow in that bed, and we have some melon, it
Marshmallow.
looks like. Oh, and that one with the little yellow flower over there. We also had some chamomile in there too.
Oh, the little this.
Yeah.
This I would say is chamomile.
So putting chamomile and feverfew in the same bed wasn't very smart of me.
And
There's
this,
lots of things that I have done which have not been.
and you can find both chamomile and feverfew sometimes like wild.
Well, not necessarily wild. It spreads.
Okay.
So we'll find not so much the chamomile. I wish that the whole place would be covered with chamomile, but it's really feverfew that it's considered a weed. This is ceanothus. It's also called cramp bark.
Cramp
bark. It's a very common landscaping plant. But the bark is one of the cramp bark is one of the things in my pain formula. I'm super into cramp bark. It's really good for backaches, but you have to take the bark off of the plants, and you have to have a lot of plants to be able to do that safely. So I don't really harvest the bark off of that, but it's
you were
there.
to trim parts of it off and then use that bark.
Yes, you could do that.
So that it didn't harm it, maybe.
Yep. And here's our butterfly mound again. Lots of weeds, but fortunately we use a lot of the weeds.
That's a good weed.
So here's a good weed. Well, actually, this one we may or may not have planted intentionally, but this is or I might, I may or may not have. The red clover, that's one of the best heart herbs. Then we've got some sage over there, and you can see we had a comfrey plant
There's the
over
sage.
here that has been cut down for mulch over there. So we have comfrey plants everywhere I can.
Because it helps heal the plants in the ground.
Right. And it's fertilizer and mulch.
Okay.
And it has, it's a really good herb for bones and ligaments. It's one of the best things for poultices. This is our yarrow. And this is something that's also going to grow all over. It's really good in salves. It's an astringent and antimicrobial. The thing that's interesting about yarrow as a permaculture plant is that it helps draw beneficial insects, and it will boost the immune, boost the essential oils of anything that it grows next to. So it's like this is growing
it'll
next to
taste
this
better.
sage. Yeah, so this is growing next to a sage and way too many weeds, and it will make the sage sagier.
Nice.
It's growing some mint, it'll make the mint mintier.
That's cool.
There's nipple wort.
There's
You can eat this one too, I hear, like a spinach.
yes. And nipplewort is something you can. This time of year, it's a little bit bitter, but it comes out really often in the early spring and before the lettuce in like February. We eat a lot of nipplewort in our salads around here before anything else.
Oh, there's a good one.
Oh, that plantain, and that's of course another one that plantain. Interestingly enough, the combination of plantain and yarrow. That's in our salves. You'll find most herbalists combine those with salves. They're a great combination for herbal salves, but it's also a treatment for hemorrhoids.
Hemorrhoids?
Yeah, make a salve from that. And here's our mullein, which is a respiratory herb. We also make a smoking mixture in there. There's some nettles up there.
Oh yeah.
It's used for some women's issues. It also has some properties.
This one?
The Celtic traditions have it. You grow a rue plant in front of your house to keep evil spirits away. That's more of a European tradition. Some of these
Looks like some bugs are getting the sunflowers.
looks like we need to turn the switch on. Turn the water on. Strawberries are over here.
This is a mint.
Yep, that's a chocolate mint, which I actually don't like the chocolate mints because they're lime. They don't taste anything like chocolate.
Is it because it looks chocolatey right here?
That's where, well, maybe it tastes like chocolate if you're like, how they say wine has hints of chocolate. Maybe this mint has hints of chocolate, but I'm unimpressed with the chocolate aspect of it.
I don't have that kind of a palate.
So, oh, these are daylilies over here. Show them those flowers. Those are edible. That would be another thing that would be a good grow a gardening thing because they spread and they're edible. And these when they're look at this right here. When they're
when they're
like that size,
like this?
yeah. Those are taken and put in tempura, and they're like an Asian delicacy.
Oh, so you fry them in tempura?
Yeah.
Or you
Well, you could kind of
coat them in.
You could put them in a stir fry, but I think it sounds better.
It always, yeah.
But I have a weakness for fried food. So.
Yeah, don't tell me how to eat my daylilies.
So there is a little water thing.
It's right. Yeah, it's right.
On this one right here. Go ahead and turn that one on.
Oh yeah, we got a bunch more strawberries too. Oh, yeah.
So I want to do this thing. I heard about this thing with strawberries that if you take rocks and paint them red and put white spots on them, then squirrels and birds will try to eat them, and they will hit their little beaks or their mouths, and then they'll leave your regular strawberries alone.
Oh, I just stained all my white clothes with my strawberry.
Oh, well, cover the
Decoration.
My little free libraries. So I have here on the street a little free library, and I have to check it every day because people leave sometimes random weird stuff, or they put things in the wrong sections. So I kind of have to monitor it fairly often.
Even
I
though
put
it's
some masks in there.
So there's dry goods. So
There's
people
dry
bring all
goods.
kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Here's what I'm doing since the weather got warmer. I'm freezing a thing of water. And people have taken stuff out of here. So I just put this cheap cooler in there for the cold stuff. And you can go ahead and take a look at that one in there.
So the
The spinach. The squash.
squash. Now, are these squash climbers?
Those are different. They're squashes, and I put them in that rack. This is new this year. I'm hoping that that's going to work. Those are summer squashes. The idea, and there's some
Sunflower?
sunflowers in there too. That the squashes we're gonna be able to train them up that rack, and then they'll be easier to gather. And since this is right next to the food pantry, it'll be kind of part of the way to feed the neighborhood kind of thing.
Is this just a weed?
Yeah, that one looks like a baby borage, but the other thing that's over there right around your foot is some amaranth. So amaranth is another really pretty thing that's a grain. You'd have to grow a lot of amaranth and do a lot of work to get a significant amount of grain from it. But if you've got chickens and you want to feed a little bit of your chickens, it's a
I feed the chickens almost everything, except chicken. Filbert or hazelnut.
This is what I was thinking for your guerrilla gardening thing. These are called Jerusalem artichokes or sunchokes. And some people say that they're invasive. You can pull up the roots and eat them. Then some people
It's like
get a little digestive thing from them. They're also called fart chokes. So they're not my favorite thing. And I keep trying to pull them up and get them out of here. And they keep coming back. So they're one of those things, but they look like sunflowers. If there was like a random field somewhere and they don't take a whole lot. So, if they were talking about guerrilla gardening, like, some empty field somewhere in the city, they could plant some sunchokes and
so you just roots and then they'll spread.
Yeah.
What about this tree?
oh, that's the elderberry. And then we have a fig over here. And some artichokes. We've got artichokes.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that's a lot of artichokes. Now those also, everything here is a perennial.
Everything here is a perennial. My focus is on everything that I plant is medicinal or edible. And my preference is for perennial edibles and medicinals. But there are some things that I plant every year. But
Now the elderflowers, they're edible.
they're medicinal.
They're medicinal.
Make a tea out of them, really good for your immune system.
Can we
We
go
didn't have
closer to the elderflower, the actual flower itself?
Yes, the actual flower itself has slightly different properties than the berries. And Shelby, we didn't harvest them this year because this is our first year, so I want to have a lot of berries for
Right.
syrup.
I've just got a whole bunch of them that I was gonna harvest and bring in for everyone.
They look quite a bit like Queen Anne's lace.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
We
kind
can show that. But the leaves too. It's a tree. How do I get this? How can you see this plants?
Oh yeah.
Interesting.
And then, but all of the little stems, stay away from those. Oh, here. This is an interesting one. Is this a purslane?
No.
Nope.
It might be a purslane, it might be the wintergreen. I've been trying to grow this wintergreen. Looks like it might be the wintergreen. Bring me a leaf and I'll
It doesn't smell like anything.
I'm trying to grow this wintergreen.
That's not a purslane. No, because it's not succulent enough. Oh, what is this? Is this the marshmallow? It doesn't make marshmallows, but how do you use it?
You use the root, it has mucilaginous qualities. It's really good for sore throats and stomach problems and cough medicine. But because it has this mucilaginous characteristic, people did make candy out of it. And that's where marshmallows came from. But if you can, there's a recipe online about making marshmallows out of marshmallow root, and we tried it one time. Doesn't taste or act anything like regular marshmallow. If you think you're gonna make marshmallows out of marshmallow root, nope, can't happen. But it does make something that's kind of interesting. It was worth doing once.
Sweet and candy like?
Yep, we've got some burdock over here.
This big guy?
Yeah, those big guys are burdock. I planted some golden seal, but I didn't have my watering system together, so I think I might have lost them. This one here is called Arctic butterbur or coltsfoot, but it's a different coltsfoot than the medicinal coltsfoot. But it is nice because it's a shade tolerant, early blooming flower. So it's a nice landscaping plant, but it has a it is edible to a lesser extent, but it's not one of my favorites. This other one in the middle is called Epidicium, or it's also called horny goat's weed. So it's a aphrodisiac.
An aphrodisiac.
Yep.
That's good
And
to
those
know.
flowers over here are
The white ones?
the white, yeah. They're all volunteer valerians. So those are valerians. We've got
Here's the leaf.
a rule over here. Yeah.
Oh, here. What's this guy?
Oh, that is
It's interesting.
yeah, it's not medicinal. I forget what it is.
That was just for fun.
Yeah, totally.
This is the golden seal. So this,
No, the golden seal.
no, this is rue.
This is root.
My bad.
And this is a curry plant. It's not like curry, but it's a little bit different than curry.
This is a curry type plant.
Yeah. And then we've got you can't, it's hard to tell from the regular grass, but there's sweet grass growing over there. And then we also have some horehound in there. There was a bunch of echinacea and some St. John's wort. We just planted some spilanthes and some more wintergreen in here.
Right.
But I'm hoping that the watering issues. Speaking of which, I've got to get off of here fairly soon so I can start doing some watering. This is the nursery. We sell some starts and plants over here to the community, and mostly, I also do trades where people bring me plants and I give them plants, and I do trades where people can always come and do weeding for herbal products.
For eggs
or eggs, or I have a friend who has a cow and gives me whole milk and or plant
yogurt.
starts. Yeah, and I make yogurt and
this one might be a good one for, right?
no, that one is just a tall lettuce.
Right. That you. Oh, I guess it's not for medicine, but
I think that's the basic tour. Let's see if there's real quick, and then I'll sit down for a minute. We can answer some questions, and then we can wrap up.
Yeah.
That's kind of garbage.
Yeah.
Oh, I got some mojito sticks
Lots of
back
weeding.
here, and then I also planted some
What's this?
dandelion. Oh, that is called gopher weed. It's actually, don't pull it with your, bare hands because it's a paper skin. It's a weed, but it
I
also,
don't want it to.
keeps away gophers. So they call it gopher weed. So, well, if you have a gopher,
Oh, there's the mugwort.
what was that?
The mugwort.
Was over in the Zen bed. Yeah,
I'll just peek at it really quickly. Since we really got a weed over here. Pretty tall.
Yeah.
So you do your starts for sum up for
Greenhouse.
sitting. Now it's totally wet, but
we harvest in baskets. Oh yeah. Oh no. My notes. Yeah, I thought I had it out of the way.
tomatoes, and it was a little bit, I guess I turned it too far up. I had to turn it back down a little bit. Did anybody have any questions? What time is it?
4:47.
Oh, okay. Boy, I didn't think we had enough material to go to 5. Did I get
Well, you have a lot more material, probably.
yeah. So does anybody have any questions? Okay.
In the past, I
Oh,
have
she's
previously used ladybugs to control my aphid problem. Is there an effective way to source ladybugs for yourself?
Well, I used to pick them up at my local garden store. And then last year I bought them on Amazon.
Mm.
You can
And
buy
they were
ladybugs.
they were
pretty
all
much,
alive.
all the garden stores have them. And I find that you have to buy them every year because they will fly away.
Once they eat everything, they're gone.
Yeah, so you do have, so I have to get some more of them this year and put them on that my poor currant bush there.
I'm trying praying mantis.
So there's a form of
Nematode?
nematodes. I forget the name of it, but there is a little company that sells beneficial insects, and you can buy various. They have all kinds of them, and you can buy them and put them in your garden. And I do that on occasion. Another question?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I like identify, I don't know, just tips on identifying plants, but I think that's just like a practice kind of
Oh.
thing.
Here's a really good tip. There's a plant apps. There's one called PlantNet. They're free. That's the one I use, but there's a number of them. I like PlantNet, and it's great. You can I use it all the time. You pull it out, you take a picture of your phone and full time, but I'm super into PlantNet.
Sometimes I think that like that some of them might, because it's people are identifying them, but that maybe it's got into like the wrong one.
Yeah, it's true that it's a crowdsourcing thing. So sometimes it could be wrong. So it's good to check and make sure that the majority of it. And a lot of times I need to do a PlantNet because I planted something and then I forgot because I got memory issues. Oh, what did I plant there? And what is that? So a lot of times it'll say, oh, this is, lovage and I'll go, oh, okay, I remember planning that.
But
Yeah.
it also has, so you can click on the little I so that it goes to the information part, and then you can click on the Wikipedia and it'll describe that. And then it goes, you can have, there's so many different little sources that give you more
What is that called again? Plant map?
information on it. That helps with the identity.
PlantNet. Yeah,
Yeah.
PlantNet is the one that I use, but if you just go to your Play Store,
Yeah.
and just do plant
Android.
identification apps, there's a bunch of them.
Cool.
And I heard that Apple and then Android is supposed to have something that's kind of automatic. When you take the picture, it'll automatically do it. Haven't used that yet, but
Yeah.
that's supposedly,
That's what.
yeah. So other questions or comments or feedback, or, I wanted to have a little bit more time so people could share their individual experiences around food. But we're not gonna have time for that today, but I know that you as a group do some kind of counseling and trauma and self-care work. And I would really encourage people in their own support systems to really talk about issues around food.
Absolutely.
We would absolutely love to do that. And I'm sure
Anything
that
else from anybody?
just thanks so much for being here. And this was a fantastic presentation. I feel like my brain is on overload with the amount of possibility. And I just wanted to say thanks for all of the work that you put in here, and your garden is amazing and happy.
Yes.
Oh, great, thank you. Well, was that it? Well, there's no more questions or anything, we can sign off unless anybody has anything more they want to add or suggest.
There's a few, so much amazing information, and thanks for presenting inside the chat box. I think folks are listening and watching in while their hands are occupied, and so they're unable to
Yeah.
get back in effectively. But I'm not seeing any more questions from other attendees.
Okay, well, all of you have a really beautiful day. And then I also wanted to mention Zinnia. If people want to donate anything, they can do zinniadonations.org. It's zinnia.org is the website.
Mhm.
And then if you want to buy something, it's Eagle Tree Herbs. And then also, if when I have any of these other scheduled workshops, if one or a couple of you want to drive down, it's a long drive, I know, but if any of you want to drive down to Eugene and make a day of it, people could help me with some weeding. We could have lunch and then do one of these workshops too. I'm certainly open to that now that people are starting to get vaccinated, and or you do all of our stuff outside. We can start getting out and doing stuff again.
That sounds amazing.
All right, everybody take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. This is amazing.
Bye.
Thank you.